All right. Hey, folks. Happy Tuesday. Thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. I'm going to give it a few minutes for people to hop on, so I'll go ahead and do a few quick hellos in the chat. I've made sure I was on time tonight, right? Literally, I just cooked, like just ate. I was actually kind of throwing down a little bit because I don't cook enough. So I said, let me treat myself tonight. So I had, what is it, the steel head trout? I think that's what it's called, and then like some potatoes and spinach type stuff. Yeah, something I could throw together real fast so I can get to this live. But anyway, what up, D Bradford? Calvin, dang, I got class online tonight, but I'll be listening. I was looking for you on Sunday night. Well, see, I wasn't gonna go live Sunday because it was Mother's Day. I figured you were all with your mamas or your kids were pampering you guys and stuff, so I didn't plan anything for Sunday. What up, Avocado Queen? What up, Alan? Sarah, you, hey, Janet's AMA performances next week. I just saw that she was getting honored. That'd be cool to watch. What up, Down with the Click? What up, Ayana J? Brooks Smith. All right, let me just go ahead and get through all my light work while people are still coming on. So hopefully you all had a good Mother's Day. Mine was pretty good. I just saw my mom 2 weeks ago when I was in Atlanta, so I didn't go visit her, but my mother has a whole song on my album. So it was like, hey, go listen to that because she'll be listening to my music. And so, no, I made her this nice video collage with the song and stuff like that. And then, yeah, some other nice things for my mother. But my mother has everything. So it's hard to get her things because my mom was a little bougie too. So it makes it hard to get her stuff. I remember this one time I bought her this pea coat, this nice pea coat, but it was the wrong size. Like, I think I was fresh out of college, so I really had no money like that. So I was really racking up the coins. But anyway, it was the wrong size. So she went to the store to go exchange it. And when she came back, she had a totally different coat. I bought her like it was like a grayish, I don't know what the material was, but it was nice. She come back with a whole white Olivia Pope jacket. I'm like, that ain't what I bought. She's like, I know, but I saw this one. I liked it more. I was like, but you know what? It's your day. Enjoy. So that's what she got. And then I always like Mother's Day because Mother's Day, at least in DC, is always the same day that Howard has their commencement ceremony. So I always remember my graduation date based on Mother's Day. It's crazy because I am 15 years out of Howard. Like, time is flying, but I always like seeing that sea of blue. Like when you're just in DC, you end up seeing these graduates everywhere. So I love to see it. So that's always really cool. I also saw Toni Braxton has a son that I guess attended Howard as well and was graduating, and people have been kind of whacking Toni for her outfit. I don't know if you saw Toni's fit, but Toni Braxton is going to be Toni Braxton. So she, the top is brunch. Like the top half was brunch. The bottom half was post happy hour. Let's have a great time. So it's kind of like she has like, I guess kind of like the blazer jacket, but then she got the legs out. And I don't know if those are like stage. I don't know. It kind of looks like a stage costume. So some folks are whacking Toni. Look, Toni's going to be Toni. Okay. Y'all should have learned from the I Miss You video when everybody else was in mourning and she was working her angles. Y'all just gonna have to work with what you got. Anyway, what else I went to, by the way, some of you guys might have saw this on Instagram, that Big Bounce America thing. It's like this big giant bounce house for adults. Let me adjust this up. There we go. It's like this big giant bounce house for adults. And so I went to that Sunday. It was in like Fort Washington, Maryland. And just picture these big bounce houses that are the size of a football field that adults go on and jump and play and everything like that. So I went and did that. And it was funny because it was about $50. And so I was like, $50, they tripping. And then when you go there, they have a bunch of different exhibits. There's like 5 or 6 big bounce houses. I'm telling you, these things are huge. These houses can fit 200 and 300 people at a time. And so the main one, they're like, oh, you pay for the 45-minute window. I'm like, $50 for 45 minutes? Oh, y'all tripping. And so we were there. As soon as we get in there, after about 5.5 minutes of jumping, we forgot all of us are like over 30. So everybody was tired. Everybody was sweating. And then one of us, not me, he dislocated his shoulder coming down the slide. So that was the end of that. But no, it was a lot of fun. So I feel like if you like something like physical to do, it's a cool thing for like a group of friends, right? Because it was a rock climbing thing I was trying to do. I thought I was good. I thought I could conquer that thing. I couldn't get to the top of the wall because I don't know, my socks were too slippery, so I kept slipping. But it felt like Guts. Remember Guts on Nickelodeon? Little it felt like Guts. Remember the kids would do the that big rock wall after they had to do all this athletic stuff. That's what it felt like. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. So check it out if you get a chance to go. They do got food trucks and stuff. $50 is still a lot, but I guess for the experience, it was worth it. But that was a lot of fun. So I did enjoy that. Let me read a few more comments and then we're going to jump right into everything. Joe Mario said the bottom half was the weekend. Yeah, Toni had legs and thighs out, just ready. Somebody said Calvin be acting like he's 70 years old, but he's in his mid-30s. What it is, I think because I worked with kids for so long, kids remind you that you're not young. So I think being surrounded by 5 to 18-year-olds for 11 years just automatically sucked the life out of me. So I'd be feeling like I'm super old, but no. It was fun. Oh yeah, and New York was really fun. Thanks for those who came out. That was a really fun time. Atlanta as well from a few weeks earlier. These have been some really fun events. I still have some other things down the pipeline. We're still trying to figure out what we want to do for DC. LA, we're going to push back. LA is actually supposed to be this weekend, but I'm tired. And we just have some other logistics we need to work out. So we'll figure that out. Anyway, I do want to say on the political side, there are a few elections that I think some folks need to kind of lock into, specifically Pittsburgh. You guys have a mayoral election on the 20th of this month. So make sure y'all are locked in with that. New York, same thing for your mayor. Your primary is June 24th. Y'all got a lot going on in New York City. So please act like you got some sense, because no disrespect to who's in there now, but nah. So yeah, you guys have your primary June 24th. There's a whole lot going on. You got Cuomo trying to make a comeback. It's a whole lot of different candidates. So really lock in with those in New York. New Jersey, your gubernatorial race. You guys have a gubernatorial race on June 10th, right? And it's actually your primary. And then Virginia, you guys have one June 17th. For New Jersey, you guys have 6 people that are on a ticket right now that are running in the Democratic primary, and 5 that are running in the Republican primary. So lock in, do whatever y'all need to do. It's a whole lot of nonsense going on. So this is not the time to get comfortable. It's the time to get active. Virginia, what's different with you guys is you guys actually have open primary, which means that you don't have to be affiliated with a party to vote in their primary. Because, there's open primaries, there's closed primaries. So like for New Jersey, they have a closed one. So you would have to register with that party, either as a Republican or a Democrat, and you can only vote in that Republican primary if you're a registered Republican, or you can only vote in that Democratic primary if you're a Democrat. However, for Virginia, you don't have to classify your affiliation, and you have an option to vote in either or. But I do believe you can only vote on one of the ballots. I don't think you can do both. But the reason I highlight that is because I think politically folks have to be a bit more strategic. So I would say for a place like Virginia, I think it's going to be a close race anyway. But let's just say that there are races that let's just say it's a given that whoever on the Democrat side it's a landslide. It's not even going to be close. But I would say then if that's the case and that's something that's collectively understood by voters in that state, then I suggest if there's an open primary, you actually vote in the primary of the opposing party. That way you can kind of block some of the crazy, lunatic, extremist, conspiracy theory type candidates that are starting to pop up. So, if I were in a situation where it's a given that the candidate that I like is going to win their primary for the side that I normally would vote for, if it's an open primary, I probably actually pay attention to what's happening with the GOP side. And so if I know that they have somewhat of a decent level-headed GOP candidate that's running that is kind of more like a, I don't know, early 90s kind of Republican, they still got on my nerves. But what we see now is, I don't know what that is, versus, you get somebody like that versus a Marjorie Taylor Greene type or a Lauren Boebert or some of these other folks that are way out there, then I think it makes more sense to actually try to vote against the crazy ones on the GOP primary or in that side and make sure that whoever their nominee is somebody who's not freaking, a freaking lunatic. That way, in the event that it gets down to the wire and it's the candidate you actually like, when they have to go against somebody on the other side, it's not the extremist candidate that is going to be more of a threat to you and what it is that you stand for or believe in. You're now going against a candidate where even if you still don't want them to win, you don't want them to be in there, it's a better option than what else is on the table. Like, that's how I'm kind of looking at it. So I would definitely think for people who have the luxury to be in places where there is an open primary or a caucus. And again, it's very solidified that the candidate that you like on the other side or the side that you stand behind is 100% locked in and it's not even going to be close and they're going to definitely land their primary nomination, then I'd suggest paying attention to what's happening with that other side. I also suggest for people who want to get into politics, I think the strategy also has to be some of us are going to have to run on the other side, right? The same way they've infiltrated different parties and done a lot of crazy stuff where you see folks run as Democrats, and as soon as they get in there, they switch and go to GOP, or they switch and turn to something crazy. Canada's going to have to start doing that. There's a person I keep thinking about in Michigan who I'm just like, I think of their district, and Detroit now has no black representation, but they chose to run as a Republican. But the problem was they actually believed the nonsense. Like they are a full out Trump or orange. I was like, no, you want some nonsense. But I was like, had you act like you had some sense, right? Because I definitely went to undergrad with this cat. You definitely could have got in through the GOP side if you would have actually ran on good policy that actually the people of Detroit would have wanted. And then, you would have been on that other side, but there's some element of power. But he kind of decided to grift and chase the money. So that's another conversation. But so lock in, kind of pay attention to what's happening politically. Arizona, you guys have a House primary July 15th, and that's for the 7th district. And like I was saying, I think even politically, folks are going to have to start thinking like the next 3 election cycles. You got to start thinking out like the next 12 years. Now, back in 2018, when we started doing the lives, I started saying that was the time to start thinking about 2024 and 2026. And now here we are. So now it's time. We need to start jumping ahead to the next 12, 16 years, really start thinking like long-term strategy, not just being in the moment and then being pissed off because everybody waits till we're down to the wire. And then there's a month or 2 or 3 before an election, and then nobody's happy with the candidates. And then you want those candidates to be perfect and part the Red Sea and heal the babies and I don't know, rap 120 bars a minute and be able to cure cancer all at the same time. And if they can't do one of those things, then they're no good and you're going to sit out and stay home, right? Folks got to be more strategic. You see the nonsense we're living through now because folks, again, had a very surface level approach to our current political system. And again, I'd also say don't just vote for the complexion, right? Especially Virginia. You see that lieutenant governor y'all got is running. And again, this is the lady that when she ran, she didn't run on policy. Her profile or her platform was she had an AR-15, right? She just as cuckoo. And so remember, when Youngkin was doing the whole CRT hotline and telling the parents to call if they think their child is being taught the wrong kind of history and it's centered around black this and black that, she was right there silent. So remember that, Virginia. Don't think just because you see a black woman running that she's about the collective. She's already said a bunch of different things I don't agree with. Things on reparations, things about civil rights, things about race relations in America. She doesn't understand it. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that she's not rooted here. This isn't technically her experience. And so that understanding of the plight of Black America, she has no relatability to. So I'm just, Virginia, act like y'all got some sense. Okay. She reminds me of Austin Chain that ran in Michigan. That was the guy who's, remember, I want to say he was from Nigeria, maybe first or second gen. But anyway, when he was running, he was the guy that wanted to get rid of Black History Month because he was talking about it's offensive to white folks. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's in the water with y'all. So, every now and then there's always 1 or 2 that come out here on some nonsense. So just remember, got a whole lot going on. All right. Anyway, with that being said, I did want to talk about Target for a quick second because Target is still getting whacked a little bit. Now, they have slowly gotten a few gains with this whole boycott. So within the last 2 weeks, they had a 0.4% gain in foot traffic. And last week, they had a 0.1% gain in foot traffic. Now, that breaks the 11-week cycle of a decline in foot traffic. Remember, on January 24th, Target decided they were pulling out of their DEI everything because they decided to get in line and get in code with the nonsense that's happening now. Now, DEI is a bigger conversation, but at the end of the day, these corporations have showed us where they stand. And so when the white signal came out or the smoke signal came out, we watched a lot of corporations and everybody jump on it. And what's crazy about this all, now understand Target at this point, as of April, has lost an market evaluation of $15.7 billion. And they still haven't changed their minds. That even the boycott that was supposed to happen initially was supposed to stop, but they never backtracked on the DEI stuff. And so they're still standing 10 toes down. I'm like, it's crazy because all you got to do is reverse course. You literally just have to be like, oh, we changed our minds. Let's act like we got some sense. And so my question becomes, what are you holding on for? Why are you so stuck into this? We're getting rid of all these different initiatives and programs that celebrate the idea of equity and diversity and inclusion. We're getting rid of all that. Why are you working so hard to maintain it? And it really just goes to show you how strong whiteness is in this country. They're not holding on strong because there's some initiative that's going to affect their bottom line in a positive manner where it's going to bring in money. They are literally aligning with identity politics in the name of anti-blackness and holding on to it 10 toes down to the point where they're letting the love of whiteness destroy their own revenue. Imagine that. So again, you're losing a market share value of $15.7 billion. Anybody, like, think about how, if you've ever worked in retail, think about when you're that cashier and your till is wrong or off by like $9 and they're ready to fire you and call the police and investigate. Now we're talking billions of dollars and nobody's budging. They want to hold on to it. So just remember how all these folks have been acting in this era, because for some reason, folks like to have collective amnesia once it's time to put your foot down and use the power that you have. Everybody starts having collective amnesia. Oh, it wasn't that bad. So again, I said this a few months back, where we were entering an era where a lot of the most extreme things are going to start being thrown at the wall. And even though some of it will not really come into fruition or suffice, there's going to be things that are given power. There's going to be a few inches that are gained. There's going to be some things that actually stick. And we're starting to see that. So as they continue to throw all these crazy things at the walls, some stuff is sticking, right? Because that's kind of the idea. It's, think about like, when you go to the carnival and they have that wall with all the balloons and you throw the darts, somehow the carnival will be screwing people over, but you got a lot of darts and you be missing, but eventually those darts hit a few of those balloons. And so for the people that are really trying to restructure the entire order of how this country operates, they will take that handful of little balloons that they can pop. So understand, their work is never done, right? And so, yeah, there's many things that are going to be dismissed and discarded, but there's always going to be some things that stick. So look at how universities are currently moving, right? And it's even crazier because this is starting to come into a conversation of federal money. And Orange Man has decided to hijack the country and use the national wallet as his weapon to get everything that he wants. And so you're watching universities start to shake and crumble and cave into whatever it is that this administration wants to push. Private businesses that have no connection to federal anything, not even federal contracts, none of that. You're watching them cave and jump into the boat. I'm still looking at Paramount sideways, like, who told y'all to get rid of any DEI, anything? Yep, you guys are the entertainment, right? So you saw what happened with that. But then we learned and we discovered that some of the leadership over at CBS, there's some change over there, which correlates into what happened over 60 Minutes, where the main executive producer of the show has stepped down after decades because they've pretty much been asked to start compromising the material that they're putting out in order to make sure that the news that they're reporting is not biased or against the current administration. So you're starting to see things happen, even in mainstream media. And so private businesses, like I said, with no ties to the federal government, we're watching things change. News media, like we said, is compromised. And so with the way that things are happening, as of right now, even when we're talking to federal government and how they've been really shaking the table with this administration, we've now seen 9,500 different grants get terminated, right? Worth over $33 billion. 9,500 grants. And these are grants that are centered in research for like healthcare and sciences and diseases, academia, supporting nonprofits, different initiatives that help to build and sustain communities or revitalize communities, or different programs that help encourage the youth to stay out of trouble. All these different resources that help working and middle class families. There's different programs, different services, things in healthcare, nutrition, clean energy, water conservation, clean air. All that stuff has been getting gutted and rescinded and canceled, all these different contracts. And so I don't think people are really feeling the brunt of it yet, because some of the stuff that's grandfathered in still has to play out. But understand, we're going to really start feeling some of this in the next handful of months. So this is not the time to get comfortable. And that's why I kept saying, let us not get collective amnesia when the time comes to get active, right? Too many people will be thinking like, oh, it's not that bad, we'll be okay. And y'all keep not that bad and everything, to the point where here we are. Things that, I'll say it like this. So much has been normalized in this modern time. But if you take this current era we're in, and if you were to go 30 years back and then project and talk to an audience in 1995 and say, hey, this is what's going to happen in 2025, they would think you were crazy. They'd be like, that could never happen. What? You guys have lost your mind. That would never happen here. And here we are. How do we get to that? Because again, you keep giving little inches to nonsense. And over time, things that were seen as so terrible become not that bad. And then not that bad becomes the norm. And then the norm becomes embedded and protected and then sustained, right? And then the people who are trying to actually undo that end up looking crazy or looking like the bad guy, or they're working against the status quo. And it's a lot out here. And so again, I'd also say let us not entertain a lot of these self-absorbed entertainers that are doing any and everything at the moment. There's lots of public figures who are making foolish statements or doing foolish things or thinking that they have a shot at political office, not because they have any expertise in anything, but because they can say the same talking points that you're seeing on all the blog sites and everything else anyway. I already whacked Stephen A. Smith before, but again, Stephen, nobody asked you to run. Nobody. You can have all these talking points about what's wrong with this party and that party, but you are not the person to go and do the work. So I don't know why you keep volunteering. You don't need to be in politics. Thank you very much. I'm going to pause for 1 second, read some comments. Let's see where we're at here. What up, Barbara Y? Calvin, did you hear about the DDG and Holly situation? I'm a little behind on some of the celebrity related stories. I don't really follow those two. I just, every time I look on social media, it got something going. So them two I don't really follow. I mean, I like Holly's music. I don't really know a whole lot about DDG. They have a cute baby, but I don't really follow them. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what's happening with them. Let's see. Are we going to talk about these folks who mucked up the government, who have decided not to seek re-election? Marjorie Taylor Greene, Brian Kemp. Oh, I haven't heard about that, but I can see why Marjorie Taylor wouldn't want to run anymore. She just got super rich doing some stock market scammation. So she's paid now, she can bounce. But I don't see her leaving yet, so I don't know. Somebody said, oh, not you making a song for the Anita Baker. That's funny. Just for context, when we still lived in Italy, me and my mom were at this Italian hotel, and we had just walked into like this big giant banquet hall. My mom used to have this little haircut back in the day. And so when we walked into the banquet hall, because we were looking for the breakfast buffet, I was maybe like 9 or 10. We walk in the room, and then everybody just starts clapping and standing up. And it's like people in sequence gowns. And we're like, what's going on? But they thought my mom was Anita Baker because she was performing at the venue that night. So they thought my mom was coming in there. Now, my mom, if it were me, I would have started singing something, but my mom was, she was hungry. We was ready to eat. So there's that. Let's see. What up, Raywin? I am doing great. Thank you for asking. Piscean Beauty said there's a water slide when it travels too. And even at the Big Bounce thing, they had one of the things that had water, and it was like, just as a warning, you'll get wet. I skipped that one. I didn't want to do that because my only beef with the place is that all the bounce houses, they weren't connected. So you had to walk to the different ones, which meant you had to walk in the grass. And because it had rained 2 or 3 days earlier, the grass wasn't wet. But you know, like when the grass is like just a little, it's like baby damp, like diet damp, where if you walk on it enough, it's there. And mind you, all of our shoes are in these cubbies, so you're walking in socks. It was kind of gross. So yeah, I didn't do the water thing, and I threw them socks away when I got home. Anyway. Somebody said, I heard some stuff's going down with the DNC. They're in the process of throwing out one of their vice chairs. I saw that as well. They got to figure out what they want. I think they're still not really aligned on what the direction is after the results of the last election. And I think it's what I've always said about what works against the Democrats. Because there's such a large umbrella, it's pretty much the Republicans are okay with allowing their party to be the face of white nationalism and Nazism and anti-everything that's not white straight male. That's pretty much what Republicans are now. Democrats have become the party of everything else. And so when you have everything else under one umbrella, everybody's fighting and clawing for different things. So, I mean, you have this group represented, that group represented, all these different groups that are represented. And even though we're all frustrated or annoyed with what's happening on the other side, all of us don't want the same thing. And some of the things that we want or other groups want kind of work against a different group and so on and so forth. And so it makes it really hard to have this giant coalition of all these different represented groups and make everybody happy. And I think that's what's kind of challenging the Democrats right now. And you have a lot of Democrats who feel that the only way that they can stay in power is they have to cave to a lot of what, center/right Republicans want or swing voters. And so it's going to be a mess. We don't see, right? That's the reason I ain't interested in being in politics. So we'll see what happens with that. Let's see. SF said, let them stand on business till they're out of business. That's where I'm at. I'm just really, when I'm so serious, when I say, remember how everybody moved in this moment. When they started getting rid of programs and programs for, subsidized resources for working class families and nobody said anything. Remember that. Remember the faces who were silent. Remember the people who might have signed on it. Even when it came to the people who were being appointed. Like, I'm looking at some of the Democrats really crazy because here's my thing. If I were in Congress I know exactly what it is Orange Man said he's going to do. So if I was in Congress, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that that doesn't happen because I recognize it goes against everything I stand for. So why did some of you vote yes on some of his confirmations? The very people that who are now out here dismantling the federal government, some of these people were they were yes votes coming from even people on the Democratic side. So it's kind of like some of y'all put RFK in there, who is now, I just saw they riffed some more people out of HHS, some more cancer research and everything else like that. And so it's kind of like, in the same way that you're outraged, and I get that they like to do this ceremonial nonsense and they like to do the whole reach across the aisle. That's some BS. We ain't there no more. It ain't 1996 no more. It's a different day and age. Folks gonna have to start using a little bit more common sense with how stuff goes. So yes, confirming Patel. You knew he was crazy. He looked like this the whole hearing, confirmation, and he looking like this answering questions, and y'all still put him in there. Imagine that. What? Right? And so it's make it make sense. Oh, make it make sense. Anyway, I want to keep moving on. So anyway, and with all that being said, understand that as we're seeing the changes in technology, we're going to continue seeing more misinformation, disinformation, right? And so it's also like, again, as we pay attention to what's happening politically, really lock in. And I always say go and get 2 and 3 and 4 sources of things that you read, because really be careful, because 38.2% of the population has shared misinformation unknowingly. So that's about 1 in 3 of us have all shared something that was incorrect because we saw it somewhere and we thought we were enlightening people or we were concerned about something and the information was wrong, right? Even when we go back to the COVID era, 66% of the bots online, which many people thought were actual people on Twitter or on Instagram in the comment section, on the Shade Room and Baller Alert and Hollywood Unlocked and all that stuff, and even on YouTube in the comment section, a lot of those are bots, right? On Twitter, on all these different apps. But 66% of the bots that were discussing COVID-19 were posting misinformation. And that information reached 47% of US adults. So understand that, this is why I think it's really important to really have that element of discernment, to really pay attention like what's actually legit and what's not. It's so easy for folks, like I've said a million times, all it takes is to see a big meme with some big letters and some music and folks be ready to preach. Folks be ready to start a podcast because they saw something on Instagram and now they're going to dissect it. They're trying to have a surface level, they have a surface level understanding of some content but want to have a deep dive and have a deep discussion, and out there just saying any and everything. That's why I don't really care for the Joe Budden podcast, but that's why you see old boy getting stressed out every time Mark Lamont Hill gets on there, because unfortunately he doesn't have the range to keep up with Mark. Because again, you can say what you think about Mark, but at the end of the day, the man has gone and got his PhD and researched a lot of things. So he's not going to go out there just saying a whole lot of stuff. Now, I give him a lot of side eyes for some other conversations. However, it's interesting watching somebody who is well-studied compete with somebody who doesn't really back their research. They just have their opinions and stand on it. Very interesting. And I will also say, when we're talking about the conversation of misinformation and disinformation, I think it's one of the reasons why we really haven't seen a lot of pushback with what's happening, especially when we're talking about some of these people who have been appointed to serve in the cabinet. Because again, now we've given a space for conspiracy theorists to have their backing power and implementation to the nonsense that they want to stand behind. I wish I could tell this story, but I can't. So the cool thing about having this channel is people that like work on the inside start telling you things that most of us everyday people don't get. But I can't share this thing. I want to share it so bad. I'm just going to say that there is somebody who has been appointed who is on some really cuckoo crazy what the hell type stuff. And because they're on some cuckoo crazy what the heck type stuff, they have this whole vendetta against one of these federal agencies. And there's a certain thing that they're looking for that they want to find. And it's something that does not exist. And it's, dang it, I can't give it away because I don't want nobody to lose their jobs. But just know we got some lunatics in charge right now. So folks need to really wake up. Like, God, I wish I could share that crap. But when I was reading I was like, what? And it's almost like a movie. It's like, dang, what's a good example? It's wild out here. It is. If you knew the nonsense happening in DC right now, my God, like Whitney Houston said, my God. That's why I said, do not tap out. This is the time to lock in. I know everybody's tired, exhausted, and we ain't even been but 100+ days into the new administration. We still got, 3.5 years to go. So, all right, folks. Which leads me to the next part. So let me take a sip of this tea real quick. This one is this is turmeric. I think it's turmeric chai. different. The only thing that's going to stain my teeth, so I got to brush after I get off this. And I just hit my tooth talking trash. Anyway, so the next thing here, now Republicans, now we've already talked about this, right? But now it's starting to be a little bit more confirmed, because one of the things that I've always said that Republicans like to do is the information gets out about what it is that they're planning. And then when they're confronted about it, they're like, no, we're not doing that. No, not at all. So we talked about the $880 billion 3 lives ago, which was probably about 2.5 months ago. Now it's starting to be confirmed. We saw the budget that they've decided to push forward. And again, $88 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Now, with Republicans in control of both the Congress, as far as the House and the Senate, they're going to use a process called reconciliation, which means they just need a simple majority. You just need 51 to 50. They don't have to do the 60 thing anymore, right? And so all they really got to do at this point is get it passed in the Senate, which is something that could very likely happen. And once it's passed in the Senate, and Orange Man goes and signs it. What's also very interesting about Orange Man, he's only signed 6 bills so far. Only 6 bills have been put into law under him, right? 2 of those bills are all about environmental protections that he's decided to strip away. Something with regard to like waste and water and sewage and emissions and everything like that. Some of the protections that were there, they've decided to do away with. So that was one of the bills that was signed. There's another thing centered around the conversation of marine life that they've decided to gut as far as protections. But what's also crazy is, like I said, only 6 bills passed when you have, a majority in the House and the Senate. You also have the Supreme Court. But that's because he's pushed 147 executive orders, right? This year, just in this 100 plus days, 147 executive orders. Let me give you some context. During the Barack Obama era, Barack Obama averaged about 35 executive orders per year. In those 8 years, he had a total of 277 executive orders. Again, we've said Orange Man is already at 147, only 100 plus days into his administration. Biden, who just got out of office, right? His average was about 40 executive orders per year. And in those 4 years, he pushed 160. So we're 13 away from already surpassing what Biden did in 4 years in less than 120 days. That's the Orange Man. And just so you know, these are some of the highest, actually, these are the highest numbers with regard to executive orders in modern history. Reagan had 381 over his 8 years, but on average, that was about 48 executive orders per year. Carter had 320, which was a lot, and his average was 80 per year. But again, Orange Man is at 147. So getting back to the $840 billion that's been cut from Medicaid, now that would affect 8.6 million Americans, right? That's 8.6 million Americans who would become uninsured when we're talking healthcare. And I think we got to go a little bit deeper, because how do we get here? One of the things I always talk about is cause and effect. I really want people to stop having a surface level approach to politics and stop living in the now, but really paying attention to how we get here, cause and effect, the before and after, and long-term outlooks on different things. That's really what we as a society have to start kind of locking into to really understand what's happening. So can we back up? One of the things that's also happening right now in real time is the Ways and Means Committee is trying to find a way to extend the Paul Ryan 2017 tax cuts, or more so the tax code. The tax cuts weren't really for us. And so that finally expires this year. And so when it was initially proposed, what initially was stated when it came to the numbers around that tax code, which was signed into law in 2018 after it was passed in Congress, was that by 2025, which is where we are now, 99.6% of all the tax cuts and the tax breaks that were marketed to us as these great tax breaks and tax cuts to help the middle class. And this is when they told us that when we would get that $1,500, we could go and remodel our kitchens. And so they painted it as something that was going to make our lives better as working class and middle class Americans and working poor Americans. And this was going to save democracy. And really, this was all about taking care of the small guy. Now we get to the end of 2025, and we're almost there at this point. We're already in May, right? 99.6% of all the breaks and the tax cuts went to the wealthiest 1%. The rest of us had to split that 0.4% of the tax cut. So 99.6% went to the super rich. The other 0.4%, we split and shared across hundreds of millions of people. That's the reality. And so I want to go a little bit deeper. What did that tax cut, or that tax cut for the 1%, but we didn't get it, what did that do over the span of the last, about 7 or 8 years, right? One, we know it gave huge tax breaks to corporations. And so this is one of the reasons why the United States is going to lose $3.1 trillion over 10 years. And we've already kind of lost some of that because, again, these were signed into law in 2018. So we're talking about from 2018 to where we are now. We as a country have lost 3.1 trillion, right? And that was in tax revenue, okay? And that also required deep cuts to domestic services. And what are we cutting right now? What are we getting ready to propose to cut? We just talked about Medicaid, right? And it doesn't stop there. That's just one. Two, they slashed the corporate tax rate down from 40% down to 35, and then cut it down to 20%. So they went from 40 to 35 to 20. It was in a phase, and it spread out over some years. And so corporations, again, continued to get more and more tax breaks. Again, the United States, we ended up losing another $1.8 trillion during the tenure of that program as far as that tax code that's currently in fruition at the moment. And so just to give some context, right now, only about $1 out of $9 in federal revenue comes from corporate taxes. Now, if we just go back to 65 years ago, it was 1 in 3. So who do you think is making up for the difference in all this revenue that's not coming in? It's not the super rich. It's us. This is one of the reasons why all of our taxes kept going up every year after 2020. People kept thinking, oh, it was this happened, that happened. No, it was already signed into law that our taxes would keep going up. I think a few lives ago, we went over what your tax break would be. And then one of the things that was also interesting within that law is they made sure that the tax cuts for the super rich were permanent. The things for us, they continue to vote on, which is why they have this whole extension and some other things. So that was 2. Then we talk about number 3, gave multinational corporations with profits that were stashed offshore, gave them tax breaks, right? Tax cut of about $600 billion. So companies that already weren't even paying taxes got an additional tax break or tax cut. They're moving all their money offshore, and they still get a tax break. They're getting money put into their accounts. Here you guys go. It's $600 billion for you guys to all split. Okay, who do you think is footing the bill? It ain't them. All right, let's see if we got this one working. All right. I think we're back on. So annoying. All right, I think we're back on. Okay, am I back on yet? Yeah, so every time I start talking some real stuff, they would be freezing my live. Like, and I know it is not my device because this thing is brand new. Sorry, guys. Y'all know every time we start talking real stuff, I get frozen. It's happened ever since what's that? I don't remember which live it was, but it keeps happening. It's like the 3rd time in a row. But I'm gonna backtrack a little bit just to make sure we didn't skip anything. So I'm gonna go back to the we talked about the multinational corporations having offshore accounts, right? Offshore accounts, $600 billion in tax breaks and tax cuts. So of course, that's a thing, right? Companies that aren't even paying their taxes get into the tax break. Then we get to the 4th thing, right? Reduce the top tax rate on the wealthy from 40%, and then they phase it down to 35, and then I'm sorry, wrong one. They reduced it down from 40 to 33%. Right. And so the idea was for the Ryan tax breaks to consolidate the lower tax brackets, kind of put everybody in these different balloons. And then that would cost the U.S. $1.5 trillion over the span of the next 10 years. So again, we're looking at all these different trillions that are being put on the working and middle class. Right. Then we get to this next portion. So we've done 4 so far. Then we get to 5. Right. Slash in half the effective tax rate on capital income, which is mostly received by the wealthy. The U.S. has lost nearly $500 billion because of that. That's number 5. Again, all of this is coming out of our pockets, not the wealthy, but the working class, the middle class. That's whose pockets are being, whacked at the moment. Then we get to this next portion. Slash the top tax rate on hedge funds and other pass-through businesses from 40% to 25%. Again, the U.S. lost nearly $413 billion. Again, who's paying for this? Understand, every time that these losses in revenue are being, recorded, this money has to come out of somewhere when it comes to making cuts in order to continue paying for the different services that benefit everybody, right? That's one of the things that's still happening. And then the other piece, of course, eliminated the estate and gift taxes to boost inheritances of millionaires and billionaires, where again, the United States lost another $187 billion. So those are 7 different things that have taken place. And so understand that the lapse in tax revenue from the wealthy has been burdened by the working and the middle class. So now services that were once guaranteed are always on the chopping block. This is one of the reasons why every time you see Republicans want to introduce a budget, the first thing they want to do is cut all the programs, because now there's not the same amount of revenue coming in from the tax code that used to exist when the wealthy paid a little bit more, because that revenue is no longer coming in. And the working and middle class, we're not bringing in enough to counterbalance the difference. This is why they have to keep dropping and throwing in new cuts. So the only reason Medicaid is on the chopping block right now for that $880 billion is because they are trying to extend the Paul Ryan tax code for another 10 years. They're trying to extend it because it expires this year. And what's crazy is the only portion that expires is the tax code that we, the working and the middle class, have to pay. The locked in piece for the super wealthy, as far as the rates that they have, those are permanent. That was one of the things that was signed on into law back in 2018. And so now they're trying to extend those same laws to make sure that we continue to pay a higher tax rate and that we continue to foot the bill for the super wealthy. Their stuff is already locked in. And so because we don't bring in enough revenue as the working middle class, because the dollar doesn't stretch the same way, the cost of living has skyrocketed. We have to pay more for housing. We have to pay more for food. We have to pay more for healthcare, education, and everything else like that. The money has to come from somewhere. So they have to kind of keep whacking us and extending that tax bill because they don't want to change anything to make the wealthy pay more. Their stuff is permanent and locked in. Understand that even if Orange Man gets out of office and somebody else takes over, there will have to actually be an act of Congress to go into place to undo where the wealthy are with regard to their tax code. And that's probably not going to happen, just so you know, unless people are really about it. And so understand that was just Medicaid we're talking about, because there are other services that are supposed to be cut. And when we're talking Medicaid, who does that benefit? That benefits families with children. That also benefits children, pregnant women, the elderly that are on low income, and as well as the disabled. And again, that's just Medicaid. We didn't talk about the 30% cut to SNAP, right? The $290 billion they want to cut out of SNAP. And the idea with SNAP is, again, SNAP, that's food stamps, that's services for people who, you know, are not getting the right nutrition or don't have the kind of funds to feed themselves, even if they are working, just because there's just not enough coming in. And then you also have to incorporate the idea of some people who live in food deserts and the options are limited. Even with all that being said, the idea is the federal government kind of wants to end that program and send the power back to the states to run the SNAP program. But the problem is we have a lot of states that don't have that kind of revenue that can accommodate that, right? We have a lot of states that are also still struggling because now they're responsible for their own disaster relief. So in the same way that North Carolina requested funds because they're still reeling from the results of the hurricanes from back in the fall, and Orange Man said no, because remember we saw the hurricanes hit, then they went inland and it was just rain, and you saw this random mountain town get flooded where the water was 9 feet high. They still have not received any federal relief because FEMA is being gutted and defunded. We saw what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is struggling with over in her state. She talked all that trash, played the game, and them tornadoes came and took out everything in March. And Orange Man has still said, no, we're not giving you any emergency funding, use your state funding. And the problem is we have a lot of states that don't bring in enough revenue to, one, pay for disaster relief, pay for SNAP, pay for healthcare, which, again, some of that is to the fault of the governors, because there are governors who refuse to expand Medicaid into Obamacare because they just hated Obama that much that they would rather make their state suffer than let, you know, the face of healthcare be somebody that doesn't look like them. So you have all that happening. So then when we get to some of these states that are heavily reliant on federal funds, they're about to be in a world of hurt. A state like Alaska, 50.2% of their revenue is federal. It's support coming from the federal government. They are federally dependent. West Virginia, Mississippi, 45% of all the funds into their state are coming from the federal level. Kentucky, 46%. Louisiana, 50.5%. These are states that can't afford to run a SNAP program. These are states that can't afford to get hit by too many more earthquakes or hurricanes or tornadoes or flash floods. And so it's a whole lot going on. I'm not going to spend all day on politics tonight, but I just, like I said, y'all going to have to lock in. I think there's too many people who, because things aren't going really great, they're tapped out and said, F it. And I get it. It's fine to mark your piece, but you still have to have strategy. We just can't sit around and just be in our feelings forever because, again, the world is going to keep moving, whether we're a part of it or not. And soon they'll be making more choices for us that we didn't ask for. It's going to be really interesting to see what's going on with education as they continue to gut the Department of Education. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with FAFSA. The only thing that made me a little sad with seeing all the college graduations, my fear is that this might be the last year of normalcy when it comes to academia and higher education and people getting their programs funded and different things like that. We're already seeing the gutting and the changes. Like, understand, a lot of people who are students at research institutions or like R1 institutions where, let me backtrack just to kind of put it in layman's terms. So there's a lot of universities that are research institutions where, yes, they're still teaching, people are getting degrees, but you have tenured professors where their main thing is research. And so, yeah, they lecture, they have classes, but they're working on different projects or initiatives, and they're researching things in the sciences or in humanities or just geographically or with surveying and economic, all these different things, right? And so you have research one institutions. I came out of Howard. Howard has become one of those where, especially during the pandemic, they were one of the universities that served as a research institution trying to figure out how do we get out of this crap. And so you're seeing grants that once funded a lot of research institutions be pulled. And so in addition to what we've seen with HHS, which is, that's CDC, that's the FDA, that's the NIH and all those different things, you're also seeing it at the university level. And so the dangers with that is there's usually correlation and collaboration between the universities and some of these agencies where students that are in graduate programs or in med school or dentistry school and all these different things during the summers, they may go and they may collaborate and do work with some of these larger agencies. And a lot of times that research, like, how do you think we get to the point where we have these advances in medicine or in research? Even when we're talking, I really keep promoting the idea of like PrEP and DoxyPrep and stuff like that, just because when we're talking about sexual health and STIs and everything else like that, there are now options where people can have safer, experiences with what they do. So how do you think we've gotten to a place where something like HIV or AIDS is no longer a death sentence, or more so AIDS? HIV has never been a death sentence, but as far as AIDS being a death sentence, right? How do you think we've gotten to a space where people can now have whatever condition and still live a long, healthy life? How do you think we've gotten to a place where, people may feel that they're exposed to something and they can take DoxyPrep and that can help fight chlamydia or whatever else is out there, or syphilis and all these different things? That comes from people who've done research and trials and different grants and things that were funded. When we talked about the breakthroughs that took place with sickle cell research a few years ago, where they started to find new ideas of treatment that may actually make us get closer to somewhat, if not even a cure, but a remedy that makes it so people that have sickle cell, because there's different variations of it, where they can have a more sustainable life where they don't have to keep having these sickle cell attacks every handful of months, or they get triggered or something happens because they ended up, I don't know, they fell into the pool and now it triggered a sickle cell attack, or the temperature in a room was too cold and it triggered an attack. Like, all of that research is coming from the collaborations between these R1 institutions and universities and some of these HHS institutions and some of the global collaborations happening in different countries and everything else like that. And we're watching all of that just be gutted because for some reason there's an attack on science, because they have now painted science to just be the work of the enemy, right? And it's not because of concerns that people have, because we know there are deeper conversations where, yes, science has been used to work against people in some instances. But what you're seeing now is science that is utilized to benefit everyone, to ensure that society can still exist. You're seeing that being gutted. You're seeing the protections be chipped away. Things that have kind of worked to ensure that folks will be all right, we're gutting it. Like, my thing with cutting all the cancer funding and research is like, cancer knows no tax bracket. It doesn't matter how. Look at Steve Jobs. I forgot what he died from, but that kind of stuff, you can't buy your way out of cancer. You can't buy your way out of Parkinson's disease. You can't buy your way out of lupus, right? And so, make it make sense. Folks are just on some nonsense, right? Anyway, let us read some chat, and then I can't wait to get to these white South Africans. I got some words for y'all. Make it make sense. All right. All right, where are we? Okay, these are all the comments without still buffering. It's so annoying. I don't know why I keep having to buffer. Like, it's not even a device. I just think it's my new location. Like, because I'm not, y'all know I moved, of course. But I think the like the broadband wires that they have, I don't know what their system is like. But anytime it's storming or raining outside, I just know what's about to happen, right? What up, Christopher Perkins? Please continue very clearly articulating real Black political media news work. Calvin Michaels, your articulation, detailed analysis is excellent. Thank you. I appreciate it. Alan Lewis, Calvin, do you feel like the country could go bankrupt in the near future due to high inflation, loss of federal jobs, and investments in education, research, and technology? I think there's a whole lot that can happen. It's one of the things I was kind of warning against in the summer. The thing that's annoying with this crap, to be honest, because there's just been a swarm of like disinformation and misinformation, even when you're literally going with all of the obvious and putting everything out there, you're still getting whacked on 20 ends with people who are fighting you tooth and nail, thinking, oh, that's never going to happen. And one of the things I kept saying in the summer is, I think what has worked against many Americans is Americans have never collectively known struggle. Yes, we have the issues that we have in this country, but it's still a very privileged struggle. We as Americans don't know what it's like in this current lifetime to live in a country where the unemployment rate is over 60%. We don't understand an experience where child mortality rate is in the 20th and 30th percentile. We don't really live the life experience of, the threat of bombs going off every other week. You having brunch and out of nowhere, here comes some shells landing. Y'all got to run and go to the bunkers. That's not our experience. And so because we've always just been okay, folks think that they can just keep moving in the same manner, and all the guardrails that have given us some element of comfortability, even though that comfortability, it varies depending on your experience, because you still got anti-blackness and the class warfare going on. But even with that, it's still a situation where we don't have it nearly as bad as some of these other places. And because we're now stripping away at the investments in education and infrastructure, like even some of the things that just passed in the Build Back Better bill are being gutted and canceled, which are also indirectly affecting jobs. And so as we continue to yank and pull back and divest from education, divest from the sciences, divest from financial practices as a country that would benefit everybody long term, because it's all about making sure the super rich are good and the hell with the rest of us, we're going to start feeling it. And it's going to get to a point where even people who are super wealthy won't be able to buy their way out of certain things. And so as far as the economy, what we're also forgetting is the rest of the world is moving on. The rest of the world, like think about when Trump was trying to do his tariff nonsense. All these other countries got together like, okay, well, the U.S. is tripping. Don't worry about them. We'll make this alliance and we'll make this. There are going to be some treaties and deals that these other countries have made amongst themselves that will create a space where the U.S. is not even needed anymore. So even in the event that Orange Man, I don't know, somebody takes him out, he out of there and somebody else comes in. Even in the event that happens and there's a new administration and they're trying to, build amends with all these other countries that we pissed off, there's no guarantee that old treaties are going to come back. There's no guarantee that we'll still have the same relations, because a lot of countries remember where America stood when all this happened. And even though I think people understand that the United States government does not represent the will of every person in this country, people are still going to remember the way that the United States moved. People are still going to remember the vileness and the hatred and just the nonsense and stupidity that was floated around, and how our leadership is just out here doing anything, and that the people weren't mad enough. Because I've already said Americans still ain't mad enough. They're not. I think if the tables were turned and the current president was black and doing exactly what's happening right now, he would have been a hashtag by now, 6 feet under. No ifs, ands, or buts. The Air Force One would have disappeared. We've been at the bottom of the ocean by now, like all kind of stuff. But again, that love of whiteness is so strong that white Americans still don't really know where they stand. They're fighting for the things that they're passionate about with regard to making sure that they're okay. They're not making sure that the country is okay. And the reason I keep harping on them is because the power is in their hands collectively. That's where we're at. Understand, Republicans don't need the votes of other marginalized groups in order to win. They just need the white vote, and they got it. If enough white people show up, they got it. Democrats, they need everybody, and they got to be able to pull in the sprinkle of white folks that are going to vote as Democrats and pull them in to barely win every single time. And so I think there's a whole lot coming down the pipeline. And I think as other countries advance and surpass us, there's going to be even more animosity, and Americans are going to be looking for somebody else to blame. So they'll keep continuing to do what you call the infighting, where right now, the phase that we are in as a country is it's everybody's fault within the system, except the super wealthy and those who are actually screwing things over. So we're going to get mad at the working class when we see somebody at the grocery store and they bought some lobster tail on food stamps. Now you mad and you pulled out your camera trying to record them because my tax dollars is paying for you to eat shrimp or to eat lobster. Like, you got people doing that nonsense. Or, there's folks who are mad because they think that, if somebody gets a special program to give them a better chance at a better education because they were given a crappy deck of cards thanks to policy that was backed by federal and state law, that's the reason why their life isn't great. And so we're in this era where, rather than looking at the obvious and realizing that our current administration and those in charge are just gutting the country for their own, prosperity. This is a rich man's world right now. They're just doing anything, and they're doing it right in our faces. And folks ain't mad enough. Like I said, and I said this before Orange Man got in there, I've been saying the goal was to privatize a lot of these federal agencies because there's money to be made. In addition to that, when you privatize the federal agencies, they no longer have oversight over what some of these corporations and businesses and super wealthy would like to do. And when you get to that point, now you can profit, and there's no regulation. So there's no rules with how this goes. And so this is why when you're looking at Elon and Doge, why is it that every agency he specifically went after to really destroy and dismantle were all the agencies that were investigating his business practices or had active investigations or cases coming up? All of these agencies are gone. or gutted. It's just a shell with a building and a few people left in there. Or they took the agencies down so bad to the point where they'll never be able to really handle things because now they're backlogged, right? And so there's a reason all of that has been going down. It has nothing to do with cutting fraud or trying to be efficient, because at this point, they've actually spent more money doing the Doge nonsense than had they just left everything alone, because they have to keep going back into litigation with courts and then bring these people back and then send them away and then bring them back. And this person got rich, but now they come back, and it's been some nonsense. And so we're literally being robbed on the daily and being told that it's for our own benefit. But again, I think whiteness is so strong, white folks ain't budging yet. Every time I see these rallies, they ain't mad enough. I saw the one where they were doing the Negro spiritual, and they were trying to sing the "Let Nobody Turn Me Around." And I just see the white woman, "Let nobody turn me around, turn me around." I'm like, okay, all right. I mean, they out there, they spending more time working on the signs than being pissed off. Now, I do see that outside of one of these hearings, I saw the people protesting because it was centered around the Medicaid, because now they worried about grandma and grandpa not having any health care. So now it's getting to the doorstep. But collectively, Americans ain't mad enough yet, because there's no way. Like, how did we get here? If this was anybody else, country would be burning right now. But again, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Black America has decided, we done tried to save y'all a million times. We're not going to keep putting ourselves on the line. So Black America has kind of pulled back for a minute just to kind of restructure and recalibrate and just have a little bit of peace of mind before you get back in the trenches. And because of that, there's nobody really leading the charge, because all these other groups don't know what they're doing, which is why all of these movements have failed. Just saying. Didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but yeah, that's where we're at. Let's see. Didn't Brett Favre steal money that was intended for the poor? Yeah, the $2 million for the volleyball gym and the speaking. Yeah, out of Mississippi. They've been doing it forever and a day. Like, it's, man. I'm over this nonsense. Like, I'm like, somebody just do it already. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna read a few more comments here and we're gonna keep it moving. Yes, definitely a conflict of interest, Carolyn. Definitely. Star Cherry said it's getting harder and harder to keep the momentum of movements these days. And that's because one of the things that they talked about with Project 2025 was just bombarding us with so much stuff that you don't even know what to focus on. Just think about how every day is an extremity. Let's backtrack. Even when Orange Man got in the first time, remember, it was a wild time. Like, this channel, we were having a lot going on every live and in the news. It was so many things I was covering, and it was crazy then. And then the pandemic hit and it got even crazier. Even all of that is almost like a fraction of the constant chaos we get now. Every day is something wild. Every day we're going to go and we're going to try to just take over the Panama Canal. We're going to go and we're going to try to take Canada. We're going to try to take Greenland, right? We're going to cancel all of our international relationships with different businesses or different countries. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to gut this with education. We're changing this. We're getting rid of the SNAP. We're going to go back and we're going to try to still get rid of Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. We don't have a plan, but we're going to get rid of it. And that's going to happen. We're going to give the police qualified immunity and make it permanent. We're going to make the official language of the United States English. It won't have that Spanish bit anymore. We're going to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It's like every day is something crazy. And then Cuckoo Man gets the $400 million jet. And it's so much every day that I don't think people can really lock in, because it's draining. You're just getting whacked from all sides and you don't know what to center and to focus on. And then again, we talk about the cuts with different benefits and all the and Head Start and now we're attacking the universities. And I just saw Harvard lost, I think, another however many $100 billion in investments on top of the $100 million in investments on top of that, however many billions has been gutted because the Trump administration said, I ain't through with y'all, and we're going to make it so you guys are not tax exempt. Like, there's just so much going on. And this was a part of the plan anyway, which is why I was getting on y'all nerves leading up to the election, telling everybody, act like you got some sense. I know there's certain things that y'all are feeling some kind of way about, but those are surface level issues at the moment. Again, the things that we're fighting and that we want, you can't have if the country ain't good. And so now the country is really, it ain't good. So the privileges that they think are privileges that people have been fighting and clawing for, don't worry about right now, because now we got to undo the nonsense. So just be ready to be inconvenienced for like the next 10 years while we try to restructure the nonsense that we're living through, right? We got judges getting arrested. We got mayors being arrested. We have everything under the sun happening. Now the movie studios are going to get tariffed. Somebody do it already. Anyway, let's talk about these refugees that have come here because they have escaped the tyranny of being in South Africa. Remember, he was running on America first and all this stuff, and we got to take care of Americans. And now here we are. And again, whiteness is on full display. I just need y'all to understand, like, please remember these moments, because folks, I'm telling you, when we get to 2028, folks are going to act like none of this happened. And there may be some logical candidate that actually runs, and we're going to get bombarded with the disinformation and the misinformation. There's going to be all kind of podcasts that arise. There's going to be all kind of YouTube channels that pop up, and folks are going to start finding something wrong with whatever the candidate is, and they're going to try to tell y'all that what we're dealing with right now ain't too bad. Because that's exactly what happened as we came to the last election. Everybody, well, we had the stimmy, right? He gave us a stimmy. He ain't said nothing about a stimmy since. Y'all ain't getting no stimmy nothing, right? He's stimulating his pockets while y'all over here getting laid off and unemployed and everything high. Anyway, the only thing I guess we could highlight is the price of eggs is slightly going down finally because the bird flu stuff is slowing down. But it ain't because of anything he did, right? Anyway, so getting to South Africa, I do want to say, take note of what has the interest of your federal government, right? Like I said, whiteness is centered in all of this. And one of the things to remember is Orange Man has shut down, as far as his administration, he has shut down refugee admissions globally. Like, nobody can come here right now. There's no refugee anything. Doesn't matter what's happening. If they blowing up your country, too bad. That program is done. In addition to the fact that the agency that even push and support those programs have been gutted too, right? More risks, more layoffs. You lay off 230,000 federal employees. There's a reason why there's that many employees, right? In order to run a country with 340 million people, there's a lot of moving parts, and they have decided to just keep gutting and chopping away at these moving parts and somehow thinking everything's supposed to flow. But anyway, like we said, globally, refugee admissions programs, all that stuff is cut, except for this specific group of what you call white South Afrikaners, right? And so the United States has also decided they will no longer provide aid to South Africa as well. And so just to give some context, now we know South Africa is a majority Black country. And the reason I really want to harp on this is because I need you to pay attention to the parallels of how this mirrors exactly what's happening here at the same time, right? We know South Africa is a majority Black country. Now, they have finally begun to do different things to say, hey, we got to find a way to kind of make things a little bit equitable here, because, again, one demographic, specifically white settlers who've been there since their Dutch ancestors came back around, well, at least since the early 1900s. But apartheid kicked in 1948. But long story short, that demographic has come up in there, snatched up all the resources because, again, remember, South Africa had lots of gold and diamonds. And that's the reason the Dutch showed up over there to begin with. Then they said, let's set up shop. And so you've had all that happening. We had apartheid and everything else like that. And things are still just not quite equatable. So there have been some laws where they're trying to say, hey, let's start making sure that there's pockets of land that actually go to the people, as far as the additional 80% of Black people that live there and different things like that. And so all of a sudden, it painted the picture of, oh my God, they're taking everything from us. They're taking our land. We're oppressed. Oh, it's so hard to be white in South Africa, even though we own everything. And so it's like, let me get this. So the demographic that shows up snatches everything, molds a government system in 1948, mirrored around Jim Crow in the United States. That was apartheid in 1948 when it kicked into gear, right? And then receives the majority of the wealth, decides that they're oppressed because the majority population has finally said enough, right? So can we go through some stats? So like I said, South Africa, their main resource, or one of the big resources that brought the Dutch over there way back when, was gold and diamonds. And so a minority white population reaped the benefits of the gold and the diamond-powered economy. And then they frequently underpaid the non-white workers, right? Or the labor workers that worked in these mines. And they kept the lion's share of the wealth, the land, the resources, the amenities, everything, the programs. They got to keep it for themselves. And then they also brought in Indians to be indentured laborers. These are people coming from India. And so this is why when everybody was having a conversation about Tyler, and she kept saying she was colored and people didn't understand it, I just kept quiet because I'm like, I'm going to just let y'all sit here and argue and fight. But understand, that group of Indians are what you call the colored in South Africa, right? And so, you brought in the Indians that were there as well. They were going to be like the indentured laborers. And now they're, like we said, they're called what you call colored. But they were treated terribly. Not as bad as the Black folks, but they didn't get the same benefits as the white. But they did get a few more benefits than the Black population. So you bring that group in there, all right? And then between 1960 1983, you have 3.5 million Black South Africans who are forcibly removed off their land. Forcibly removed, 3.5 million people, All right. That's like 4/5 of the state of Washington, maybe like 3/5 of the state of Washington. Imagine that many people losing everything and being pushed out of here, right? And then being forced to live in segregated townships or neighborhoods. And then you had what you call the Group Areas Act, which is, again, that's when they moved everybody. It was like, well, this is where y'all are going to live now. And so you had these forced evictions and subsequent overcrowding in these segregated areas that led to a lack of access to basic services like water, electricity, and sanitation, because you stuffed 70% of the population on 13% of the most unproductive, unable to farm on land in the country. So again, you pulled 70% of the population, you made them stay within a 13% segment of the land mass, but it's the area that you can't really grow a lot on it. You can't do a whole bunch on it because all the good land has been given to who, right? So then even when we talk about like Cape Town, you had 60,000 residents that were relocated from, what you call District 6 to 20 miles away from township because it was now going to be declared whites only. It's kind of like, and I wouldn't want to put this in the universe, but it would be like Orange Man just coming to your neighborhood and saying, okay, all y'all get out now. Barron and his friends need a place to stay. So, you don't need to bring anything. We're going to take that too. So yeah, you can keep your portraits and stuff on the wall. Keep all that. Just get out. And then you guys, how about this? You guys can live at Yellowstone. Yeah, right by the geysers. That's a nice. You guys y'all talk about bathing so much. You'll love the hot water from the geysers at Yellowstone. So all y'all move over there. All 40 million of y'all. We're gonna stuff y'all over there. It's also a super volcano, so any event that it ever erupts, all of y'all will be gone. But hey, at least you got hot water, right? So that's kind of like that. That what happened with that. Then you also had the Bantu Education Act, which pretty much segregated the schools. This is why I said apartheid pretty much mirrored what was happening in the United States with Jim Crow. And so they had segregated schools. You had white schools, you had the Indian/colored schools, and you had the black schools. You already know which schools got the least amount of funding and who got the short end of the stick, so we don't even have to go through it. And then in addition to that, they also made like interracial dating illegal. So you had 20,000 folks arrested for marrying white folks, went straight to jail, right? The immortality laws, immoral, right? And so again, now when we're looking at the end result, right? Black folks make 80% of the population in South Africa, but they only average about 30% of ownership in Johannesburg, right? They only average about 30% black ownership in Johannesburg Stock Exchange as far as their market, with the other 70% being owned by white folks and foreign national folks who don't even live in their country. And then when we're talking about where we're at now, 1 in 4 black children have a higher death rate than white children due to malnutrition and related diseases, according to the World Health Organization. Then even when we're talking about the 2020 Amnesty National or International report, out of the 23,471 public schools that were there, 20,000 of those schools, or 20,071 of those schools, had no laboratory, 18,019 had no library, and 16,897 had no internet. Okay, these are the black schools, by the way, right? 40% unemployment in the black population, only 7% in the white population. Let me see here. 8% of the population, or white folks make 8% of the population, but they hold 62.9% of the top management positions and jobs, right? Even when we're talking subsidized housing, you have 2.3 million households who are still waiting for housing. Let me tell you how long they've been waiting, because they weren't waiting since 2020 during the pandemic. They weren't waiting since 2014 or 2001 or 2000. They've been waiting since 1994. 2.3 million households since 94 waiting for housing. This is why you see so many who are kind of in like what you call like the tin shed type housing situation. I'm trying to word this carefully so I don't offend anybody. But if you sometimes you look at the pictures of the aerial views of certain areas and you see that people are living almost as if their homes are just built with whatever material you can find. This is one of those reasons, right? And so what has happened is the black population is like, what the hell? Apartheid ended almost 30 plus years ago, and stuff is still not equitable because the white demographic is still running everything, still has everything. And even though we've done all these different initiatives, we've tried to do the color rainbow coalition, all this different stuff is still not working. Stuff is not adding up. And so people are like tired of it. Now, this is where the conversation of genocide comes in. So between, let me see, April of 2020 and March of, let me make sure I have my notes right, March of 2024, there were 225 people who were killed in South Africa due to disputes over land, grabs, fights, different things like that. Now, 101 of those people were black. Of that 225, 53 were white. And so, and mind you, those were farmers. These weren't even the super wealthy either, right? And so that 53, that number of 53 white folks who have been killed during this 4-year span or 5-year span, they have been served as the face of this genocide that's happening in South Africa. And that's what Trump is running with. So he's ran out here and said, oh yeah, they're being persecuted for being white and everybody's trying to kill them and they got to get over here and everything else like that. And so here we are. And now all of a sudden there's this genocide. And so the United States is like, well, we have to help you guys because you guys are so important. We, to hell with every other group of people, but we're going to make sure we help you guys. And so what's interesting is the president even said like this past Monday that, oh, well, how we selected them had nothing to do with race. And I'm like, really? Okay, interesting. And so again, white Afrikaners are not facing genocide. That will be the Palestinians or the Congolese or the Ethiopians or the Sudanese. And so the narrative that these wealthy white individuals who have had their land stolen, like, because that's what they're also saying. They're trying to paint the narrative that, oh yeah, all these white people are being pushed off their land, the wealthy, they're just losing everything. And these crazy black folks are out there just wild and breaking into mansions and stealing the pearls and the diamonds and everything else like that. And it's like, no, you colonized and stole the land and everything else like that. And then, or at least your ancestors did, your great-grandparents did, your grandparents did. And they're literally just introducing programs to try to create a space where that 80% that are living in just God knows what kind of conditions, depending on their experience, literally programs that are being created to try to help them get out of the trenches. For them, as far as white South Afrikaners, they feel that that's oppressive. Sounds just like America. And so can I tell you something that's very interesting as far as the eligibility? Because we're going to talk about this handful that flew and landed at Dulles the other day, right? Now, remember, the United States does not do race-based laws. This is why we talked about the black farmers that lost their lawsuit in 1999 when they sued the United States based on everything that we've talked about in the past with the USDA farms and how Black American farmers have lost 14 million of the 15 million acres of land that we once owned, and all that happened in the 20th century, and how we were left out of the USDA program, so we weren't eligible to do business and commerce with a lot of companies because they only work with USDA farms, and then there's conversation of heirs land. And I've talked about it a million times, so I'm not going to do it, but just stick to the channel. You know what we're talking about, right? They lost that case specifically because the judge said, you can't prove discrimination by just saying that this is racist. You have to give us something else. And so since then, that has always set precedence where race could never be the determining factor against somebody when it came to these different lawsuits and everything. You had to more so show harm, which is why the conversation became, let's change the language. Let's talk about how harm has taken place. Let's talk about who was disenfranchised. Let's talk about different policies that took place. And this is why words like equity came into conversation, which is one of the reasons why they also like to fight and whack against DEI. And remember that time I was going over the list of suggested words that were going to be banned from all federal agencies and academic institutions and everything else like that. That's why we're getting words like disadvantaged, disenfranchised, underdeveloped, terms like food desert, terms like, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that are often used all the time. Just pretty much any term that you can utilize to highlight what happens as an end result of racism. Systemic. Word systemic you can't even use. There's a reason why there's an attack on all of those words, because the remedy, sorry, the music is jumping out. The remedy with regard to the results of that 1999 lawsuit taught folks that in order to fight for what you need to fight for in these court systems, we just can't use the term racism anymore. We have to show cause and effect. We have to show the end result. So we have to talk about redlining. We have to talk about housing discrimination. We have to talk about all of these different programs we were left out of. And now this current administration has gutted all those words out of consideration, right? So that's where we're at. But anyway, getting to my point. So when it comes to those who are coming here from South Africa, specifically white Afrikaans, who are coming to the United States under refugee status, here is the eligibility to get here. To be eligible for resettlement consideration, individuals must be of South African nationality, be of Afrikaner ethnicity, Afrikaner, not African, Afrikaan. Think of Khan, like Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, this Khan artist, right? And so, all right, so to be eligible for resettlement consideration, individuals must be of South African nationality, be of Afrikaner ethnicity, or a member of a racial minority in the country, meaning you can't be Black because Black is not a racial minority in the country, and must be able, this is the important part, guys, must be able to articulate a past experience of persecution or and I'm going to bold this visually, pretend this is on the screen and it's bold right now. Fear of future persecution. Again, you just got to be an Afrikaner, and you just have to be able to articulate a past experience of persecution. Remember, persecution can just be being told about yourself, just getting some mean words. Persecution doesn't mean you're going to jail. It doesn't mean somebody threw a brick through your window. Persecution can just mean somebody called you a name that you didn't like. Persecution can just mean somebody called you out on your nonsense, right? That's it. That's persecution. And then again, fear of future persecution. Fear of somebody saying something to you that you don't like. Doesn't this just sound just like everything we've been dealing with on this side with CRT and woke and anti-DEI? And when they decided to push all this, it was, oh, because it makes white people feel bad for being white. So we got to change this in the schools and so on and so forth. That's it. Emphasize and understand there is no mention of lost land. There is no mention of stolen businesses. There's no mention of attack on livelihood. There's no mention of stolen property. You just have to be white and afraid. And you can come to the United States. I got to sip on that. Now, with that being said, one of the agencies that's assisting with this resettlement into the U.S., the Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, they're also going to provide service to a lot of these folks, specifically in states like Iowa, Idaho, and North Carolina. I said, ooh, what fun places to go. I mean, North Carolina ain't too bad, but ooh, who wants to go to Idaho? You guys are really going to love their winters. And so they done flew these people to Dulles. The first cohort was 49 different people that came. They landed at Dulles. You had Troy Edgar, who's the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and you had Christopher Liddell, the Deputy Secretary of State, greeted the families in the hangar. He was shaking hands. The families had these little American flags and just, welcome to the United States. We're so happy that you're here, and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, kind of nonsense. And this was the quote that they had. Today, the United States sends a clear message in alignment with the administration's America First foreign policy agenda that America will take action to protect victims of racial discrimination. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said in a statement. Let me get this straight. So the demographic, let me start with South Africa, and then I'm going to bring it back to the United States. So the demographic that shows up to a country that they didn't belong to, they hijack the gold mines, they hijack the diamonds, they take all the resources, they take all the wealth, they create a draconian system of laws, and they were able to enforce this because of weapons that they had, right? And then you create apartheid, you disenfranchise 80% of the population, you take their land, you kill them as well. People were getting killed because they didn't want to get off their land. You move 3.5 million people to stay in 13% of the landmass in an area that is barely inhabitable. You force them, people are literally living in huts. Some folks don't have running water. There's not a lot of sanitation. Understand, the people who were hit the hardest when COVID showed up were the people who were in those makeshift living arrangements and everything else like that. And so you have all that happen. You have this demographic of people who have suffered under white South African rule for years, to the point where you had to have a pass to go on certain sides of town. There's all these different rules. I suggest paying attention and reading a whole lot of different books. This is why you had somebody like Stephen Biko fighting the fight, even though they killed him, beat him to death. You had everything that was happening under the sun to this demographic of people. That system ends. Now, this is where some people give Nelson Mandela criticism, because Nelson was like, all right, let's just create peace and let's live happily ever after. And there wasn't that conversation of retribution. It's almost kind of like when the Civil War ended, and rather than really making an example out of those who were on the Confederate side, Lincoln was on some BS. And I'm going to talk about that in a different video because I'm trying to make some more pre-made content. And like I said, I really suggest reading The Grift by Clay Cane, because he does an excellent job of explaining the nonsense that happened after the Civil War. We'll talk about it in a few videos from now. But anyway, because there was more so, let's just live together in harmony and sing together and amen. The rights weren't, or the wrongs weren't righted, right? They didn't make people whole. And those systems, even though they had been taken down, there was no effort to ensure that you could undo the damage. And so the residuals continued. And the white demographic got wealthier, the black demographic got poorer. Now, there have been some in the black demographic who have been able to go on to college and thrive and do well. There's going to be some who slip through the cracks, and there are some who are doing well, but the system wasn't working fast enough to undo the wrongs. And again, they're only 30 plus years out of apartheid. So think about where the United States would have been 30 years out of slavery, right? That's 1895, right? That's right around the time they just said to hell with Reconstruction. We saw what happened with that, right? So that's where they're at. So the nerve of having all the resources and still doing better than everybody else, and you're the minority population. And now because there's a conversation of equity and a conversation of making things right and just making sure people even got freaking running water, you want to sit here and act like you're so oppressed. And you want to know what's funny? The ones who came here are not people who lost land. I want y'all to understand that too, because the wealthy that were in South Africa that were white rejected this offer back in February. They're not leaving any of that because they got long money. They're like, we're not going to the United States, because they understand their money doesn't stretch the same way in the United States. And a lot of them who are wealthy over there understand that when they come here, they will become middle and working class. They knew what was up. They're like, we ain't got to mess our stuff up. So yeah, I don't mind having to share a little bit of my wealth with those people, but I'll still have it way better. So they didn't get on the planes. The ones that are getting on the planes flying over here, these were farmers and folks who were already working middle class over there, but they had the power and protection of whiteness to get them the benefit of coming over here because they're afraid. And so what they don't realize, because they think they're going to come over here and cash in and be wealthy, you're about to come over here and be the working class. And the elitism that you got the benefit from by being white is not quite going to work over here, because white folks are mad at y'all over here because they feel like they're losing something. And so now we have white on white violence getting ready to take place as far as intra-community violence within the white collective, because there's a lot of working poor and working class white Americans who feel that they have been left out of the American dream. And when Orange Man ran on America First, they thought America First, meaning them. Now you're bringing in another group and they get the benefit from different programs and everything that folks are still waiting in line for. Y'all are about to find out, right? And so these folks are about to come here. And again, you're getting sent to Idaho. What are you about to go over there and do? Right? You're not getting a tech job. Good luck. So we're going to see how this goes. Like, I understand there's going to be a lot of working class white Americans who feel that they have been cut in line. And so they're about to feel it, right? And it's crazy. And what makes it even interesting, because Orange Man is talking about racial discrimination, blah, 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 blah. Understand, even when you're talking the conversation of immigration, when you're talking about the continent of Africa, and especially when you're talking about like Black people on the continent of Africa, specifically in West Africa, it's 3 times harder to even get to the United States when it comes to paperwork and all that, because they don't want them over here to begin with. And so it's interesting to watch, some white South African racist folks hop on a plane. I bet they was on them little Delta flights eating them Biscoff cookies, just eating good, right? Them Biscoff cookies be hitting, right? Red carpet rollout, get over here, and you get met by Homeland Security, in the State Department. They meeting you at the hangar and everything else like that. Meanwhile, everybody else, they over here snatching everybody else up and dropping them off in countries that they're not even from. So, make it make sense. So now that you see this, it's interesting to watch this administration be so passionate about the well-being of these white South Africans over there in South Africa, because they're so concerned about racial discrimination. But you're watching them actively racially discriminate against Black people every day, all day, and double down. I mean, double down, 10 toes down, 6 feet into the ground with a foundation to put some cement on it. And let's really build a new edifice to really shake the table and make sure that we continue to have our way. Because right now, this is a white man's country and everybody else to the back. So it's that over here. But now you want to give empathy and sympathy to a group that was already oppressing another group of folks. Right. So it's very interesting to see how all of this works. But no, those are not wealthy people who have had their land stolen or were under the threat of being killed or murdered. No, these are white folks that applied and said, you know what, even with all of the benefits and advantages that we had as white folks living in South Africa, we weren't able to thrive. We weren't able to have what we think we deserve, because somehow it must be with these new programs that are coming out, it's only going to get worse for us. So you know what, we're going to use our whiteness and go to the United States, because we heard that the white folks get treated really well over there, when in reality, y'all are going to learn they don't. They get the protection of whiteness, but when we're talking equity, commerce, and wealth, white folks are poor in this country. They're broke, right? When this Medicaid gets cut, they're going to really feel it. And when they cut and get rid of Section 8, everybody's laughing, thinking it's only Black folks. Oh, no. White folks, y'all are going to feel it, right? And so that's where we're at. Make it make sense. I swear this is a movie. They're like, this is a really good movie until you realize you're living through it. You're like, what the hell? Come over here, you oppressed. You went and stole everything, you oppressed. Child. Okay. All right, let me read some comments here. And by the way, that was a very watered down history of South Africa. So I suggest going and really reading into what they have going over there. And I'm sure there's some people on here who are actually from South Africa who can give better insight. I try to give a quick rundown just to give, a crash course. I don't like doing crash courses, which it's also annoying, by the way. Sometimes with this channel, folks get mad because they think I give a little too much context. We need the context. This is how we've gotten to where we're at now. Because again, everybody wants to be an expert with a surface level understanding. No, you got to dig deep for stuff to make sense. Anyway. Yeah, folks was getting on my nerves with my New Jack Swing doc because they're like, you just got to get to Teddy Riley. We're going to get to Teddy Riley, but I'm going to spend 30 minutes on some other stuff first. Got to set up the context. Let's see. Somebody said Gulf of Calvin. Nikita Clark, yes, it's going to take decades to correct the mess. Like, I think people need to understand, because I think one of the things I kept talking about too, even in the last election, there were so many who wanted to see things come into fruition right away. One of the downsides to when you consistently put in what I call bad players within our politics is that the end result gets pushed further and further out to the point where you have to be almost content with understanding that maybe everything is not going to happen in your lifetime, but you can make sure that things are going to be good for your kids and your grandkids. And unfortunately, some people aren't even moving in that. They said, to hell with the kids. If I can't get it, ain't nobody getting it. And unfortunately, that's where we are. Man, let's see. Somebody said, what up, Harold? Wild how apartheid South Africa paralleled segregation in the United States. They literally looked at how Jim Crow was working in the United States and said, we're going to do that over here. The same. This is why when it comes to, again, that conversation of cause and effect and context, this is why I'm always saying, like, look at the bigger picture. You know, y'all know I really talk some black people politics here, but we still have to look at the bigger picture globally because anti-blackness is global. It's just that all these different countries got their own systems of anti-blackness, but there's still that anti-blackness bubble. And that's why, again, these people, these Afrikaners, you know, they're coming over to the United States to be white. They're not coming to the United States to be South Afrikaners, right? They're using this to get into the door to utilize the privileges. Like, it goes back to what we said about how all these nationalities became white. They recognized that collectively there was more power by using whiteness instead of nationality. So this is when we watched the Italian and German and Polish and Austrian and French and Dutch and this, that, and not that become white once we started seeing the creation of unions in the early 1900s and the late 1890s and everything else like that, because they didn't want this demographic coming up in there. So when you look at what happened with the Ford plant in Richmond, California, first of all, how do you think black folks got to Richmond, California, right? You had the Ford plant that opened and created all these new jobs. But then they decided, no, you Negroes are getting too much. You can't have these management positions. We're going to move further out of town, right? We're going to move the factory out of town, and we're going to create laws to where you as black people will not be allowed to even live remotely close to where our new factory is going to be, because if we do that, then you guys are going to follow and come to these new jobs. So no, this is going to be our introduction to redlining, right? We're going to copy what Baltimore's doing that they just started in 1910. And so you end up seeing what ends up happening with the Ford plant, and where for years, black folks weren't allowed to have any management positions. And for those who still found a way to get to the new location, I want to say the new location was Palo Alto. Let me check my notes just to make sure, because I don't want to give you a fib here. Yep. So Ford had moved the plant from Richmond to Palo Alto. That kind of crashed somewhat of Richmond's economy at the time. And so when they created this new Palo Alto location for the Ford factory way back when in the early 1900s, and they created housing specifically for these new white families to come in there and take all those jobs and get the nice housing, they created an ordinance where black folks weren't allowed to go to Palo Alto. They had to stay in Richmond. This is why Richmond, when you talk about North Richmond, California, North Richmond, North Rich, like that's rooted in the origin story of what happened with that Ford plant. We just fast forward 100 years, right? So many stories to be had. Like, we could be here all day, but everything is connected. Everything ties together. That's why I'm always like, dig deeper. Let's not be surface level. So I know some folks are like, your videos are too long. You be on here for 3 hours. Yeah, but I make a video like once every 2 weeks. So it's kind of like, got to give you your 2 weeks worth. Y'all be wanting to have a 3-minute lesson and then want to go lead a charge and start a movement and then start collecting donations and stuff. Be out here scamming people, saying anything. Let's see. Thank you. Ayabode Jackson, I appreciate that. The historical context you're offering is priceless. I just want people to if you can get the right context, you can the more you understand about context and cause and effect, it makes it so much easier to piece all this together. And then that's probably why sometimes if y'all start seeing me like stutter when I'm talking, it's because there's like a million connections going through my head at the same time, and I'm trying to speak this while I'm thinking about this at the same time, because while I'm saying something, it lets a light bulb go off and I remember something that I read back, and it's like my head just be spinning. This is why I like the pre-made content over the lives, because I can get a bit more polished. I can watch it back and like, go back and reshoot that part because they're not going to get that. Anyway, Nikita Clark, taking land is not taking life. And again, most of these folks who flew over here did not get any land taken. They just say, we out. We got it so hard, right? Oh, my goodness. And what I even find more funny, now, remember, Orange Man ran on all this anti-immigrant, that he was trying to pull in the black folks and tell us they were taking the black jobs. And meanwhile, the Biscoff cookie flyers are coming on here first class, getting a handshake. When is the last time somebody from the State Department came to your neighborhood to shake a hand and tell you how great they are and happy for you to be here? Okay. Y'all about to be working at Foster Farms chickens in them factories, just so you know, those that came from South Africa, because I don't know where y'all plan on working. Let's see. We're living in a Black Mirror universe. It's scary. You know, I have yet to see that show, but everybody keeps talking about it. I know it's been out for a few years. I'm gonna check it out one of these days. Don't shorten your lives, Calvin. I'm not shortening it. I like the lives. Like, to me, the lives are easier because I can just, the lives, I don't know, maybe I spend 2 to 3 hours gathering all my information, doing my notes, preparing what I've got to say, and then I just come on here, chop it up with y'all for 2 or 3 hours, and I get to go to bed. Oh, and I spend maybe 30 minutes after the live putting in the timestamp so people can go to the segments that they want, because there's always some smart aleck that's like, is it too long? Yeah, that's why we got timestamps. Use them, right? Versus, if I do something like a So What Happened, excuse me, that's like a month-long commitment, right? You got to go and get all the research of whatever story you're going to tell. You got to get all the facts. You got to double check the facts. And then in addition to that, you got to go and find articles from that era in time. And it's so hard doing some of those So What Happens when I'm pulling stories from the 90s, right? Because some of that stuff isn't digitally archived, and you're trying to find all that. Then you got to go and get all your supporting documents and visuals and pictures, and you're finding magazine interviews. And I'm going through Billboard magazine and trying to find the specific edition that came out in September of 1997, and I'm specifically looking for the dance chart. You got to find all of that crap. Then you still got to film the video. You got to film it really good. You just can't be out here stuttering. And you might do 5 or 6 takes of the same conversation 8 different ways, right? And I have to, if I do like a So What Happened, I have to commit to not changing my hair. Like, I've been wearing my hair in like the twist things lately. Y'all don't see it because I just took them out. But like, if you remember, I used to always have like, they look like braids, or they look like locks, but they were just 2-strand twists. If I do something like a So What Happened, or like a music talk that's extensive, I got to commit to the same hair, because I'm not filming it all in one day. I might be filming it over 2 weeks. So I got to kind of look the same. So if you ever like look at the So What Happens and you kind of skip through, you'll notice my hair might shrink or get a little bigger. It's all this dedication. Then you film it. Then you got to edit it, right? And that takes for freaking ever. So like I said, lives are easy because I can just come up here and I can do my research during some downtime, get out here, crank it out, and have my night. Versus when you got to do the pre-made, which is why I was like, okay, well, at least let me bring back In the News. Those are a bit easier because they don't take as much time. I can do those in a day or two if I really put it in work. But yeah, it's a lot. And I'm not complaining, by the way. I enjoy doing this, but it is work. So, and I do have a full-time job, right? And I do music on the side and have to promote my music and travel and do that. And I still do film on the side as well. And I still do the community work as well. And I still have a social life as well. And I still try to date when I can. It's hard out here in these streets. So yeah. So we just make it all happen. All right. Somebody said this is so violently racist. That's why I'm saying I hope everybody remembers these errors. They're not even hiding it anymore. At least back in the day, 2 years ago, they would do these terrible things and then play stupid. Like, what are you talking about? Oh no, not a big deal. They don't even care. It's a free for all. I saw some post that somebody posted on, I think, Twitter, where some white woman was like, she was trying to say that racism was over and it ended with Gen X, and this is why white kids are saying the N-word, because they have camaraderie with the black kids. I'm like, y'all on some weird stuff. Now, good and well, right? Or that clip I saw with Piers Morgan. I do not like him, by the way, where he had, and I knew this was some nonsense because you had that Myron Gaines fool from the Fresh and Fit podcast, that weirdo. You had him, some racist blonde lady. You had Mark Lamont Hill in there. I was like, see, this is where me and Mark differ, because I think we have to not engage in all elements of media when you know that it's nonsense. Piers Morgan is a shock jock journalist. He wants to stir controversy. He wants to bring the worst of the worst on the show to say horrible things so that there can be sound bites and that those sound bites can go viral. And then more people watch his stuff and he gets a check. There's a reason why he walked off that show that he used to have in the UK. And now he's doing his own side thing. But anyway, in that episode, there was the white lady who was talking about, yeah, I say the N-word all the time, blah, blah, blah. And then Piers was like, well, why don't you say it now? And then Mark got mad, like, don't you have her say that on here? And I'm like, well, why are you on this show anyway? What? Please tell me how appearing on the Piers Morgan show is going to do anything to benefit the collective. We got to learn to start saying no to nonsense. That's one of the reasons why some of y'all get mad at me, because there's some stories I just refuse to entertain, or there's even, I've tried to come into a space where I'm not name calling or name dropping a lot of the content creators I really don't have with at this point, just because I don't want to platform them. But discernment, understand, know what's worth the investment, right? Not everything we need to show up on. Yes, we know Mark Lamont Hill is very intelligent, but there's no point in trying to reason with white folks who don't want to budge. They're locked in. That's why I don't argue with white folks. Like, I don't argue in the comments on my video because I said what I said and it is what it is. White folks that come on my stuff to come and argue anything that I've said about race, they're not arguing to fix the solution. They're not arguing to make things better. They're arguing to protect whiteness because their image is under attack, and because they can't understand the idea of a structural conversation without making it individually about them. They come and they write all these dissertations and try to tell you all about yourself and everything else like that. And they never have the range for the conversation. So you just get called all kind of names, or they try to dox you or something else. But at the end of the day, they can't dispute the facts that I put out. So I'm not arguing with y'all because I know I'm right. Not to sound cocky, but I know I'm right. So shut up. But anyway, man. All right, where are we here? Somebody said they're about to F around and find out. They certainly, some of them are going to be going back within a year. Give it a year. They're going to go right back. When they got to pay them high taxes and everything else, they're like, I'm out of here with this crap. It's not even worth it. Yeah, working class white Americans are going to hear them accents and realize that you're not one of us. Oh, they're going to be pissed off. Down with the Click said, yep, The Color of Law is a great book, all about the government segregated America, or how the government segregated Americans. He talked about Richmond in the book. Yes, we actually used that book for our book club maybe 2 years ago. It's a really, really good read. Great read. Let's see. Exactly. Shauna said, if you don't want to be educated, just say that. And that's where we're at. You're seeing the attacks on education and the attack on intellect right now. Everybody's trying to shortcut their way into prosperity. And I get that in a country that's capitalist, anything goes, but I still think you want to have some element of just this working in your favor, right? Because I feel like when you got this going, and understand education is more than just what you're getting in academic institutions, because education is just life experience. Education is having an open mind to interpret and look at things from perspectives that you may not necessarily have been exposed to, just constantly being familiar with what's going on around you. So I think, unfortunately, there's people who've just chosen to almost put like a cap on where their intellectual capacity is going to be. And they just stay there, and then they get mad because they feel like other people have passed them. And so rather than trying to make themselves better, they want to bring other people into their bubble of stupidity. And then they start podcasts, and then they start doing a whole bunch of dumb things. And next thing you know, you got the Fresh and Fit podcast. So there's that. Thank you, Lil I 3D. Somebody said The Color of Orange ship. Child, I'm at work listening, like the hit button, y'all. If you remember, she's talking about, or they're talking about The Color of Friendship on Disney, but we just trying to change it to The Color of Orange ship. Thank you, American Autopsy. What are your thoughts on Trump's foreign, I guess you're thinking foreign policy so far? Trump has no end game. Trump is just moving in the moment. Whatever's going to give him a dollar, he's jumping into it. And so I don't really have thoughts on his foreign policy because it's going to continue to keep changing. Look at our relationship with China right now. We're on a seesaw. Every day, tariff this, tariff that, no tariffs. Now we got tariffs, pause on tariffs, 90 days, 130% to 40%, 30% to 10%. China better do this. They didn't do. Okay, now we're going to lift the sanctions on Syria. We don't want to do that, but I'm going to meet with Saudi Arabia. And now Qatar is giving me a $400 million jet. And Ukraine better tell us that they're thankful with what we've done with the war, even though now we're trying to gut the support that we're giving to them. And so foreign policy is all over the place. He's just doing anything. And he also doesn't understand foreign policy because he also doesn't pay attention to cause and effect. He doesn't know history. He could care less. So it's a mess. Andres Asante said, people get out here and engage with bait content and then wonder why it keeps spreading. And I'll say this, for a lot of content creators, that's how they build their brand, because they know if you can get something to get people outraged, it will get them talking. Like, think of, now I don't really do it. First of all, y'all barely see me. Whole world be falling apart. I be at home sleep because I'm like, I ain't stressing out today. I'll talk about it on my next live in like 6 days. Right? You know, I'm never the first to break no news on here. By the time we get to it, it's been happening. But think of even like, and I've criticized some of these platforms like Baller Alert or the Shade Room, where, I don't know, they'll post a very unflattering picture of a celebrity. I don't know, maybe they just had a really bad day or an allergic reaction, and so one whole side of their face is swole, just puffed up, and they'll say, "Ooh, check out Lizzo. Lizzo was out shopping today," and then they'll put thoughts, because they know that the comment section is going to be hell. Right? It's nothing about thoughts. Or, you know, they'll post a clip of somebody who sounds absolutely terrible at a show or something, or they had a really bad concert, or they were drunk or something, and they'll make the post, "Oh, Bobby Valentino was killing it at the something festival." And then you hit play, and Bobby out, and this is not happening, I'm just making up stuff. Bobby out there sounding like anything, sounding like old boy off 5 Heartbeats, you know, "Nights like this, I wish raindrops would fall." Right? And they're like, thoughts, and they know the comment section is going to be off the chain. So they do bait clicks because they need that engagement. We don't have to do that over here, because you know what you get. It is what it is. I don't have an end goal to get like 1 million subscribers or 100,000. What I get is what I get. Like I told y'all before, we just here. YouTube is great. I'm trying to expand outside of YouTube. I'm actually considering relocating and trying to do more things actually in New York. And so YouTube is great, but this is not my bread and butter. This is our community. This is kind of like our thing. I don't look at this as, I guess, a business. It's more of, we chopping it up. We have real conversations, and we have different things that we engage in, like the book club, or when we do sometimes the Zoom parties, or those who've come to my last 2 shows and everything like that. So there's that. Anyway, we got to move on. We got some more stuff to talk about too. Said Mark Lamont Hill hosted Basketball Wives. I liked him, but he'd be collecting checks. I've never watched Basketball Wives, but I figure it's probably like Housewives and all the other ones. This is interesting. H. Dennis said, "Calvin, I think not mentioning the content creators poisoning the minds of our people is just like avoiding the issue." That's fair. They need to be called out by name. I agree. I just think what ends up happening is it still gives them traffic, and they end up getting more traffic than, like, I think of even like if I look at Twitter, think of all the people who have blown up and gotten bigger because they did something really stupid that went viral, and people on Twitter kept sharing it or posting it, and now they have an endorsement somewhere or a sponsorship or anything like that. I see it the same way with some of these content creators, which is why I was like, I don't feel like engaging. Plus, I ain't trying to be in no beef with none of these folks. I don't got time for them to be making no videos about me, and then I got to respond and everything. Like, remember that weird guy that he didn't like what I said about black sense when I was cooking all them folks who, for some reason, were in freaking Wisconsin but had an Atlanta accent, because everybody was trying to all of a sudden, "Oh, I grew up around black people, that's how I sound." But I'm like, what is this Miami, New Orleans hybrid Atlanta accent that y'all have? And what are you talking about? And he made a whole video just for me and spent 30 or 40 minutes trying to dissect what I was talking about and sounded a fool. It's just, it's not worth it. So, I mean, you know, I think when folks are doing crazy nonsense to the point where it's like, okay, this is damaging, then every now and then I'll call it out. Like, y'all know I whack voice walkings every now and then over here. But yeah, that's that. Let's see. All right, we got to move on, y'all. I really appreciate this chat. This is also why the lives are long. When they're like, "Calvin, your lives are too long," I'm like, they're long because my content, my segment is usually maybe about an hour, 20, 25 minutes. The other additional hour and 20 plus minutes is me interacting with the chat, because you guys are nice enough to hang with me at night, so I can at least acknowledge the things that you guys also feel, right? I said this is a community here, right? I wish Lindsay was on here, because she'd say the Calvinites. She was like, we need a name. All right. Okay. Thank you, American Auto Pay. I've noticed he's been following policy papers like, "You should check out the pathway to Persia, John. Trump's been following the playbook almost to the T in dealing with this Iran situation." Thank you for sharing that. I will happily check that out. Don't Shadow Baby said, I appreciate the effort you put into your content. I've learned so much from you. Stuff school won't teach us. I moved to the Bay in 99. Shout out to the Bay. That's where my family's at too. And never learned about the Ford plant redlining. Well, yeah. And actually that redlining story is also featured in The Color of Law. There's a whole segment on it. I want to say it's chapter 4. I can't remember what chapter it's in, but there's a whole chapter about that Ford plant specifically if you want to check that out. Okay. I got to keep moving, y'all. Where are we going? Let's go to, I guess we can, let's do Diddy first, and then I want to go back to Tyree Nichols. I need a break from all the racist nonsense for a second, okay? Okay, Diddy. So we're at day 2 of the trial. By the way, I'm not about to be doing no daily updates with the trial. I ain't following it like that, but I figured since I was doing a live today, I might as well talk about Diddy. So we're at day 2. They've already had the jury selected. Cassie is currently on the stand. Now, some of the things that have taken place, it's very interesting. The defense didn't want Cassie to testify because their argument was that she's 8.5 months pregnant. It's going to sway the jury. One of the things that we've learned, or excuse me, I don't know what I had some Pepsi earlier. It's just got me like, sorry, it's nasty. But anyway, and I don't even drink soda like that, but that Pepsi was hitting. It had just the right temperature. But anyway, one of the things that always happens with jury selection is they tend to want to axe and get rid of the jurors that they think are too intelligent. They want to get the jurors that are going to be the most emotionally available for either party. They want the jurors that are going to empathize with witnesses. They want the jurors who pretty much, they want the Lifetime original movie audience. That's the reality. Even when I was taking, I didn't go to law school, but in my major at the time, you had to take like these kind of law related classes. And they talk about how at one point, the average juror had an 8th grade education in this country. And so with that being said, defense is like, no, we don't want her on the stand because she's 8.5 months pregnant. They're going to see her waddle into her seat and they're going to be like, oh no, they're going to feel sorry for her. And automatically he's going to be guilty. So they try to do that. Then they also tried to say, no, we don't want her husband in there while she's testifying because we actually are going to use him as a witness possibly, which I call BS on because at this point, we're at the trial stage. If they were going to call her husband in, he would have already been locked in as a witness long before, like during the pretrial motion. So there's that. And I'll say as far as Diddy, it's interesting because I think what his team is trying to do is give the optics. And I think they're feeding into what I just said about the jury. So, you know, the family did a prayer circle right before the trial. And of course, you know, so the jurors can see the people getting the prayer in and everything. And, you know, he was reading the Bible yesterday during testimony because he loves the Lord. You know, he's just so connected with the spiritual realm. And he's just, you know, he's out here. So he's reading the word, y'all. So, you know, he's reading the word while everything's happening. While Cassie was testifying, he's giving her the heart signs. I'm like, this is getting real weird, right? And so I think that conversation of optics is there. Some people were asking, why are his kids there? Because, you know, the daughters walked out yesterday when they were giving the details about some of the things that are alleged in the freak-offs that are being reported. And again, I think it goes back to the conversation of optics. By bringing his daughters and his kids there every day, you can kind of, because you just, listen, the defense, all the defense has to do is poke holes in the prosecution story. The prosecution, you know, has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. So they can't have any holes in their story. They can't have any reason for one juror to say, wait a minute, something doesn't add up, because that one juror can throw this whole thing and there's a mistrial. And so the defense, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that even if they can just get that one juror, they don't need every juror to be on their side. They just need one. And so, hey, bring the daughters in there, make them wear the same thing. I think the twins are like grown now, but make them both wear the same outfit because that will make it nice and cute and childish, like, oh, the cute little twins he has and everything. So lock all that in. And hopefully with the prayers and the Bible and the girls being there, and then take them out when these alleged stories come out, because I don't think they want to hear that anyway. You know, it could possibly sway one of these jurors that might have a very emotional connection to the case. So that's where that is. So I think, and what's also weird, you know, there have been media requests for these tapes as far as, you know, the freak-offs that are being reported. And I'm like, at some point, some of y'all y'all got other intentions. And I think that would be a horrible idea to give any of those tapes to the media, because you know something is going to leak. It's just a given. In the same way, when the Kobe helicopter unfortunately went down and you had that officer taking pictures and was ready to start stuff, like, it just happens. it has nothing to do with wanting to tell this story or cover this trial. Somebody wants to cash in, because if they can get a hold of any of those tapes, understand the TMZs, the Daily Mails, the UK Sun, they will pay top dollar to have that kind of footage, because you can't wait to break it. So yeah, it's wild out here. But I think what's going to happen, or I think what's happening, I think with the prosecution side, one of the challenges that they will have to work with is proving that these freak offs, because this is just one piece of the trial, that these are involuntary and not voluntary, because the defense is going to come in and say, she wanted to do that. That's where the defense is going to be. They are going to push that. And it's going to kind of go back to the question where a lot of people keep saying, well, why did she stay? Why did she stay? And I think even with Cassie's testimony, it's kind of lining out some of the reasons why she likely would have stayed. I saw the portion where she signed with him at 19. It was a 10-album contract with Bad Boy Records. I was like, oh, Lord, 10 albums. Jesus, right? And remember, think back to Kesha and Dr. Luke, where she tried to get out of her contract. She sued to get out of the contract. She highlighted that she had been sexually assaulted, and they still voted against her and said, nah, you're still tied to this, and you got to pay this man some money, and so on and so forth. We've also seen the video of her getting whacked and dragged down the hallway. And so you have that element. But the bigger picture is, I think because of that contract, tangibly, because she also talks about that she didn't make any money. She only released one album. There were lots of songs and stuff that they worked on that never got released. She didn't make any money. I don't think she could have afforded to leave even if she wanted to, because when we're looking at the history of just bad boy artists in general, can you name a bad boy artist that's doing well financially right now other than Faith Evans? And that's probably because Faith Evans got off of Bad Boy when it was time. After 2001, she said, I'm out. But when you're looking at a lot of the acts that came out of Bad Boy with these contracts, a lot of them are broke. Some of them are dead. And I'm not saying he killed nobody, by the way, but it's just like a lot of them weren't doing well. So imagine somebody who is locked into a 10-album contract, who didn't make any money, and tries to get out of the contract. He would have ended her, right? So there's that aspect. And then I talked about this before in my Toni Braxton So What Happened episode, where we talked about Tina Turner when she left Ike. And because she left Ike while they were in the middle of a tour, she had to foot the bill for the $2 million that was owed to promoter. Actually, I'm mixing up two stories. Let me backtrack. She had to pay a whole lot of money to the promoters that were owed, to the point where Tina Turner had $10 to her name and she worked as a janitor. Cher was the one who owed the $2 million after leaving Sonny. So like when it comes to these contracts and stuff, I think that's one of the reasons why she probably would have stayed. And a lot of times when people sue their record label to get out, a lot of times they don't win. Some examples of people who have won was Toni Braxton, right? She won her lawsuit against LaFace, but one of the stipulations was that she couldn't talk about it for a decade and some change. So people thought she was still broke in the 2000s, when in reality she got $20 million. Tina Marie might have been one of the only people to successfully sue Motown. And the reason she was able to get out of her contract was because the contract she had was so bad that a judge deemed it, saying, hey, this is not even a contract. I don't know what they would be doing to you. But so you have that element. The apartment that she had in LA, she states that he was paying for it. He had a key. If she disappeared, he was sending people to come find her. And then when you get to the whole freak off bits, you know, he's also, they indulging in the drugs and everything. And these freak offs would last 36 hours to 4 days. It's a lot going on with it. It's just wild, right? There was a portion where she talked about the Gatorade being laced with the ecstasy. I'm like, this is a wild case here. And so I think it's a lot, right? And I remember when we covered the civil suit, and everybody was like, oh, she's a gold digger. She's just trying to cash in. And then he settled right away. And then everybody was like, wait a minute, hold on. And then that video came out, and it's like, okay. And even from what I was reading, I think they were trying to say that the video of her leaving the hotel was actually her trying to leave a freak off. I don't know how true that is. I need somebody to verify that. But this will be an interesting case. I think for the defense, they just have to poke holes in the story. And again, he's being charged with a bunch of different things. He's being charged with sex trafficking, bringing people over state lines. There's the racketeering. There's all kind of stuff he's getting charged for. So the defense is going to do what they can do to poke a hole in every charge that's against him. And the prosecution is going to lay it on heavy and throw everything out there, right? So that's where we're at. I am not 100% sure who all the witnesses are that are going to be there. We'll kind of see where this goes. And another thing too, because one part that I forgot to mention, she talked about how, when she met him, because again, he was Diddy. This is like 05. So this is when he still had a bit more pull in the industry. And, she thought the world of him, really thought he could help her get on. And 1/4 of the people who are also suing him for these different lawsuits are also people who were aspiring entertainers when they met him. And remember, this is around the time when you still needed that person who had some pull to get you in the door. This is not like today where, I really like, what's his name's YouTube channel? The Malik's, I think I always say his name wrong. It used to be called the music. Oh my God, what is it? Y'all know what? It's the guy that does the videos that Malik Ashad, I think is the channel. I think that's the channel. Let me see. I'm shouting him out specifically because again, he does a really good job of always, Black Music Archive, that channel. He does a really good job of not only like giving the details about what's happening with these different singers, but now you see he's starting to bring a lot of them on his channel. He'll interview them about their experience. That's the era we're in now, where we have more access to celebrity. We have more access to folks where it's a bit easier to get. You don't even have to get in the room, because now you can get in the email train or the social media trail or whatever and get with folks. If we're going back to 04, 05, 06, no, you needed to be in the room with these folks and stuff. So there's a lot of people who would have looked at somebody like a Diddy, like, okay, he's going to get me there. And so it's really similar to some of the stories you saw with people who even were caught up with R. Kelly, where they're like, oh, we feel like he's going to get us here, get us there. And so I think there's so much to be said. I think we're going to see a lot unfold. Cross-examinations will be interesting. I don't think Diddy is going to take the stand, personally. I don't think he's going to take it. I think his team is going to convince him to sit there, read the Bible, look disheveled and hurt and sad, and just don't say anything, because I think the minute he ends up on the stand, it's over for him. And so, I going back to what I was saying as far as that era, and this is why, like, you had the acts walk like the band walking all the way to Junior's for cheesecake. Walking from Manhattan to Brooklyn to get some cheesecake. That probably wouldn't happen in 2025, because they'd be like, hell no, I ain't doing this. They're already on the reality show. They know they can build their social media brand and climb from there. But if we're going back to 03, 04, 05, 06, no, you needed to be in there. So everybody's doing anything in their power to try to have that opportunity to get on. It will be a lot. That's all I'll say. I think there's a lot of names that are going to circulate, and we'll just see what happens. Let me read some comments on here. But ouch. Somebody said, did they do a prayer circle at the freak offs? I ain't got nothing to do with that. I don't know. Man. Oh, that's a good point. With labels, they also shelve albums, which doesn't count towards a 10-album deal. Exactly, because it's like, we didn't make our money from it, and now you still owe us for the production on that album, even though it didn't come out. Crazy. Oh, y'all throwing Mary's name in here. I'm not about to start speculating. I'm just waiting for stuff to come out if stuff comes out. What up, Jeanette Perry? Sarah, I did see that interview. I remember that. In the Janet interview, she said Diddy invited her to the studio to come hang out, but she didn't want to go because it was a Saturday. Yeah, he was trying to do more than that, because that's around the time he was doing her Son of a Gun remix. And they weren't sure if she was with JD yet. So it was like, he was trying to shoot his shot. Somebody said the defense is trying to paint his as a swinger. Yeah, I think the defense is going to paint this as, because Cassie is not this is not the Cassie suit. She's just one of the witnesses. But yeah, I think defense will try and say Cassie is 100% in on it, and that she was a willing participant and she had free reign to leave if she really wanted to. That's going to be the defense's approach with trying to, one, I think they'll bring that up when they do cross. And I think that will be what they'll utilize to try to poke holes in that story. But again, this doesn't start and stop with Cassie. There's tons of names. There's tons of accusations. This trial is going to last well into June, maybe July. It might be a few months, because there's just that many witnesses. Let's see. She was 19 when she met him, and he was 37, very successful. You have to consider the power and dynamics in relationship even before the issue of being signed to a label, which is crazy. Like, that's like my age now. I'm not 37, but I'm close. I'm getting there, right? That would be like me pulling a 19-year-old. Like, what do we have in common? Nothing, right? Yeah. Let's see. And then I do remember she had a lot of songs leak around that time where she was talking about she recorded all these like over 100 plus songs and none of them were released. Because I remember she had songs like Thirsty and I'm in Love with You. And she did release King of Hearts. I like that song. I wish somebody else sing it though. But I remember she had all these different songs that were coming out. And I think I said Thirsty was one. And but they were never associated with any projects. So I don't really know what was happening with that. Somebody said they estimated 8 to 10 weeks for the trial. Okay. All right. So that's Diddy. We'll see what happens with that. I suggest you guys follow the channels that really center it in celebrity gossip, because you got some of them folks like Tisa Tells and them that are actually at the courthouse and report all the stuff that's there. You know, follow them. They're the ones who really follow this stuff. I just kind of catch it in passing when I catch it. Right. All right. Let me read a few more comments. We're going to keep it going. Thirsty was such a good song. I like that. That was a fun one. Alan Lewis said Official Girl by Cassie. I remember that. And then I remember Karina Pearson, the 16 at War girl, also did a version of that song too. Another thing that sucks too. Remember I told you guys, dang man, when I was at Howard, I had Diddy's room. Like Diddy's room at Howard was 310B at Drew Hall. That was his room. And I remember when I moved in, that was the first thing. They're like, yeah, you know, you got Diddy's room, right? I was like, oh, okay. And so I used to wear it like a badge of honor back in the day, especially when I was really trying to work in music. Like, yeah, I just know it's meant to be, because look at the favor I got. Now I got to almost not tell nobody that. And unfortunately, that is referenced in a podcast episode of Comedically Hardheaded. So it's out there forever. Anyway. Okay. Tyree Nichols, let's go to that one. A little bit heavier, by the way. So Tyree Nichols, now I did the video initially when the police were charged and when the video came out. If you remember, this was an individual who on video, you see him get beat down by the police pretty much, right? Killed off because they beat him down so bad. I'm trying to pull up one other piece I want to share with this. There we go. So yeah, Memphis, Tennessee. And so he gets beat down by what you call like the Scorpion unit in Memphis. And the saddest part was these are also black officers. And so their argument was, oh, he was fleeing. And so they caught him and they beat him down and stumped him and kicked him. And the video is out there. Video is there. I didn't post it, but you have free reign to go watch it if you want to. And that video tells you everything you need to know. Somehow these officers have gotten off. And it's not even really a somehow. I think it's more so a cementing of what you guys should start expecting from now on. Now that Cuckoo Man has been put back into office, we talked about qualified immunity for police. And we've talked about how even in that conversation of whiteness, that a lot of white Americans feel emboldened. This was an all-white jury, and they felt that, hey, the police were justified in killing him. So can we break some of these things down a tiny bit? So the Scorpion unit was a new unit that was created in 2021. And this unit was supposed to go out into the streets and blend in. This was kind of like the New York undercover. Like just look like they're regular everyday folks. They're gonna ride in what my aunt likes to call the scrapers, you know, the cars with the rims and the music cranking, and you know, they're riding with that. They're standing out on the side of the liquor store with everybody else, blending in, and then as soon as they catch somebody doing something out of pocket, then they swarm in and become police again. So somebody pulls out some weed, oh no, nope, now we gotta take you down. Or somebody runs through a red light on accident or doesn't stop at a stop sign, now we're pulling you over. That's Scorpion unit. And so their thing was to go and stop all crime, because at the time Memphis was having a high homicide rate, very high, right? At the time they had the highest homicide rate in the country. And one of the things that we've seen happen in the United States is every single time crime is up, instead of investing money to ensure that there are resources within the communities for the communities to kind of better themselves, and ensuring that there are jobs, ensuring that there's opportunity, ensuring that there's something for people to feel proud of or feel a part of, or something that people can work towards. Instead, they spend more money getting more police and getting new weapons and getting military grade style equipment and gadgets and vests and helmets and drones and robots and tanks to bust your door down, instead of investing in the schools and everything like that. They do that every single time. Side note, it's one of the reasons why I say DC has an issue with a lot of the teenagers that are committing a lot of crime, because DC is not really a teen-friendly city, in my opinion. It's an expensive city. Everything's expensive here, and everything is for adults. DC has no skating rink. Well, actually, there's kind of one in Anacostia now, but there's not a whole lot of different things that you can do. And then a lot of the places have hours specifically for adults. And so when you're talking about things that teenagers do here, there's not a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're always caught up in a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, getting to my point, it's one of the things that we've always seen. And now that we've also gotten into 2025 and we're now seeing cuts to services nationwide, we're seeing cuts of grants and programs and contracts, crime is about to go up anyway, everywhere. And it makes me nervous as to what the response will be with regard to policing. So just remember that. But anyway, the Scorpion unit had a zero tolerance policy on crime. We know zero tolerance means nonsense. It means anything goes. And so with that, it meant that police got to do what they got to do to commit, or to combat crime. And so again, what ends up happening is these officers that are part of the Scorpion unit, they're all young too. Some of them are rookies, right? They all had joined the force between 2017 and 2020. They were between the ages of 24 and 32 at the time. And again, like we said, they use unmarked cars. They do have the vest that says Scorpion unit on the back, but a lot of times people didn't know who they were. And so we fast forward, Tyree ends up in whatever situation. They claim he's fleeing. They catch up with him. They beat him until he dies. The officers are charged. I've already done a video on this, and I talked about how it was likely that we probably wouldn't see a whole lot change, because even though those officers were kind of the anomaly as far as being charged, they were still the anomaly. I highlighted how the state of Florida, when we talk about 1989 to 2013, not a single officer had been charged in any of the 600 plus police involved incidents where somebody died unarmed, right? That's just the country we live in. And so thinking back, there were some people who felt that this is not racism because the officers were black. And like we said a million times, anti-blackness is not only served through the hands and the lens of whiteness. You can always get black folks to be a mouthpiece or a physical piece for white supremacy anytime. And when we're talking about even the policing system and everything else like that, the anomalies that get charged or those who are made an example out of, it still doesn't necessarily change the system. It still doesn't necessarily all of a sudden mean everything is well. And again, when we're talking anti-blackness, it can be served on through any kind of entity. And so, yeah, you got black officers. And I think that's one of the reasons why we kind of get the result that we get. What worked in those officers' favors through the lens of those white jurors is they, like I've always said, white people see the police as an extension of themselves. White Americans love the idea of policing everybody. And so in some instances, they don't see Tyree Nichols as somebody who deserved any element of due process. They felt in that moment he is in the wrong, blah, 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 blah. And so, yeah, he died. And you know what? It was his own that did it to him. So it must have been justified. That's how they move. But we know for sure that Tyree Nichols been a white person in that exact same age, in that exact same predicament, and done the exact same actions and been killed by those black officers, that those officers would be one step from the electric chair or the shooting range or the firing squad right now. No ifs, ands, or buts. We know that's the reality of what it is. So I want people to really pay attention to just how all this stuff works. And again, it goes back to what I was saying, where in order for a system to change, we can't depend on anomalies to be the example. Those officers who were charged, they were the anomaly, but look where the anomaly got us. Back at square one. Justice was not served for Tyree Nichols at all. And with anything, the one thing I will say for those officers, from this moment on, because they got off, and some people are like, oh, well, you don't want to put other black folks in jail. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Just understand that they actively chose to participate. And I'm not talking about them by just being police officers, but I'm talking about the conduct in which they conducted themselves and how they killed Tyree Nichols. They chose to, again, further that system that works against us, and you literally took a life of somebody from your own collective. The system granted you privileges and let you off because you continue to further that system. And that's something you have to live with for the rest of your life. And so enjoy that. But, again, when we're talking about like systems that need to be gutted, like I used this reference before too. Remember we did the story of Piggly Wiggly, right? And I talked about Sylvan Goldman. Like if we're talking about grocery shopping way back when, and this is just an example. I just want to give like a little scenario here. So grocery shopping in the United States before Piggly Wiggly was a little bit different. You went to the grocery store. It wasn't like how we got the big aisles and stuff. The grocery store was a little shop here and there. And then everything you needed was on the back shelf, right? And you go there and you talk to whoever was running the store. Oh, hi, Mr. Johnson. Can I get, 6 eggs and some grain and some salt and a little bit of bread? And then they would go and they would get everything and they would give it to you. And then you go. And then eventually we had a basket. And so you had the basket. You go back there and you start carrying things in the basket. And so what ended up happening is people would often go and they would get all of this stuff, and these baskets would be heavy because a lot of people didn't have cars yet. This one we still had walkable cities, right? We do now, but there's a lot of cities like, like Houston is not really a walkable city, right? It's you need a car, right? Atlanta is not really a walkable city. You need a car. But anyway, so people would have all of this stuff that they bought from the store, but they couldn't carry it all because it's heavy, it's in his cart, and people would have to take multiple trips here and there. So then when we talk about Sylvan Goldman, he decided, I have an idea. What if, I make a different kind of store where, there's aisles and you don't have to go and wait for the person to get your stuff. You can just get it yourself. And that way things move a little bit faster. So then we kind of start getting this Piggly Wiggly idea, and it's, these different aisles and stuff. And now people have free reign to walk and go and grab things, which means they can get even more things. Because, think about if you go to the old version of the store and Mr. Johnson is helping one customer, but there's 10 other customers in front of you, and you got to wait for all of them. And maybe there's an item that's at the very, very top, and he can't get up there. So he gotta go. Now he gotta go get the ladder and see you there all day. Now here's this store where you can just walk and get the stuff. Great. So now we can get more things, which means carrying these baskets is getting harder. So he decides, hey, what if we put wheels on the basket? Then you can push it and it's not heavy, which means people will put even more stuff in the cart. We'll make more money. And so boom, he creates the shopping cart. And so it's just the basket with some wheels and they're pushing it. So he puts it out there and he makes the grand debut and nobody uses it. The men think it's too feminine. And what is this? I'm a man. I'm strong. I don't need to push anything. I carry my pack of sugar, right? And the women are like, this is too much like pushing a baby in a cart. I'm not doing that. This is demeaning. And so he has to pay models to go and just push the cart, right? So you need $5. You want to make $5 real quick? Okay, here, put this stuff in the cart. And I just need you to walk in circles for like the next 20 minutes around the store. So he pays a handful of models to just push the carts around the store and pretend to shop. And eventually, other people start coming in and they start seeing things. This goes back to when we talked about the spiral of silence theory, but it's almost like the opposite of the spiral of that silence theory, where here's that theory. Let's say we're a classroom. I'm the teacher. I told you guys you did a great job on this live. So you guys are getting pizza. And so you guys have to tell me which pizza you want. And let's say all of you say you want cheese, but Tyler Hackner wants pepperoni. The spiral of silence theory most likely often proves that Tyler will stay quiet and just not say that he wants pepperoni because everybody else in the class already said they wanted cheese and he doesn't want to rattle and shake the table. And he's like, keep the peace. So it's almost like the opposite, where you have all these people who come into the store and now they're seeing everybody else pushing carts. They don't want to be left out. They don't want to be the person who's out there just standing still trying to carry their heavy sack of potatoes. They don't want to look foolish. So now, even though they think this is weird, they're going to go and grab that cart too and start pushing it. And hey, this ain't too bad. Okay. And here we go. And now we fast forward. The entire system of how we shop has changed, where it started from the inside out. It was a process where there were lots of things with trial and error and testing things out until it got there. When it comes to the policing system in this country, there has never been a consolidated or a major effort to really change things. Yes, you have the George Floyd anti-lynching bill. Yes, we came out with the body cams. Yes, there's different things, but it's been patchwork policy. We still don't have a national database because, again, these officers, if they want to, can go and work in any other police department because there's no national database about officers who've been fired or whatever else for, the offenses that they have committed while they were in the line of duty. Like we still don't have that. There's not like a national set of laws that take place. And now that we have the new administration in here, we're going to start seeing the seam ripping of any progress that we thought we had. So even with Derek Chauvin, you see like the civil rights charges and suits and all that stuff has kind of been thrown out. They were trying to make an effort to try to get him pardoned and stuff. That's not happening. Minnesota said, no, he still owes 20 years. He will be in here in this cell. Y'all can do what y'all want after his time is up, but don't count on it, right? But until there is a larger effort systemically to change policing in this country, Tyree Nichols is going to continue. And we've had dozens of other Tyree Nichols stories. I kind of pulled back from covering so many of the police-related killings because I didn't want this to become a trauma channel. But now that we're living in this current era, and this is a very pro-police administration, people really got to be careful because that's all I got. Yeah, I just think people got to have a bit more discernment with things because it's going to be a little wild out here, unfortunately. And now you have a lot of white folks who are feeling deputized and feeling confident in the way that they move, and they feel like they also have the right and the authority to go and do things as well. And that's why I say everything is always connected. This is almost going back to like what you saw with Tulsa, where, and not even Tulsa, we can talk about Ocoee, Florida, we can talk about Lafayette, where when there were these race massacres, white males and their sons and uncles and grandparents and everybody else became deputized and were given free reign to go and terrorize these black folks or go and arrest and do whatever. And that energy is still here now. Think about what's happening even with this immigration conversation. You're having people who are taking it amongst themselves to feel that they have the authority to go and start snatching up people, and they are not members of any kind of agency. They just think they're doing their due diligence, and they're going after people who aren't even alleged to be undocumented here, that, and third. It's wild out here, right? So, and this is why I say do not fall for the symbolism. It's one of the things that I've always kind of fought and argued about, especially in the era of what we thought were the good times during the Obama years, where I kept saying symbolism is not tangible. Symbolism is like building a garden at a house that burned down. The house is still going. You can have all the beautiful flowers you want to, but nobody lives in the house. And so symbolism, unfortunately, it gave a lot of people the false illusion that everything was good. And so now that we fast forward to 2025, people who no longer got active, people who checked out, people who were like, I'm good, this is the checkpoint where I want to stop at as far as caring, here we are. Everything under the sun is going down. I just think as a black person living in America right now, we almost need eyes on the back of our head at this moment. That's all I'll say, right? Anyway, let's pause and read some comments here. Not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I just need y'all to realize what we're living through right now. By the way, I think that's my last heavy story, so the rest of this should be a bit lighter. Yes. Well, no, actually, there's one more. Let's see. Somebody said Cassie's "Kiss Me" was favorite Cassie song. It reminded me of Destiny's Child T-shirt, but I guess because it was the same producer. Oh yeah, traffic stop for Tyree Nichols. Thank you. K80 did too. This ain't the first time I heard about that unit doing something crazy, but most of these special police units, they commit more crimes than they stop. And what's crazy about that Scorpion unit, and specifically those officers that, killed Tyree Nichols, there was a complaint about that very group by a different person who had a really bad run-in with the police just a few weeks earlier, but nothing happened after that complaint. And let's just say something may have happened after that complaint. Maybe they would have never had the opportunity to have a run-in with Tyree Nichols because they would have been on administrative leave. Like, see how all that works when nobody gets active or nothing happens? Like, man. Piscean Beauty said, I have a theory that part of the plan is to gut all of these services and programs to where crime increases and then use that as a reason for hyper-policing, suspending, exactly, habeas corpus. Like, yeah, that martial law, anything. And because look, even going back to the immigration thing, the narrative is all these people are gang members that they're snatching up and throwing out. Everybody's a gang member. Even in DC, this past weekend, they went and grabbed like 197 people out of restaurants that work there. I said, yeah, because the people that are washing dishes at the restaurant really are gang members, right? Because they nicely wash all the dishes and then they go and commit some crime. I feel like they probably not have 9 to 5s, but okay, that's where we're at. 2 out of 3 at least felt some type of way about what they did to take a plea. And I also think, and I said this before, policing, a lot of times when you see those videos when somebody's getting beat or kicked in the head, and we talked about Arthur McDuffie before too. Go back and look at that case. Arthur McDuffie is the reason why you had the Liberty City riots of 1981, which is oddly enough, those riots started on the same day as the Mount St. Helens eruption, which is interesting. But anyway, so on one side of the country is Mount St. Helens erupting, and on the other side, Miami's burning. But you often see sometimes in those moments when the police get somebody that they've had to chase or run after, now they're in their feelings because they feel disrespected. So they bring it up a notch, right? They're not even really working within the scope of their employment anymore. This is just their personal vendetta against whoever it is that they've captured. And now they're going for it. Like, think back to the Rodney King video when that came out and how they just wouldn't stop, right? Same thing. Piscean Beauty said convict leasing on steroids. Yeah, it's the time we live here. Rodney Hilton, they're trying to give him the death penalty. I do need to go back and follow that case. I know that's the one about the father whose son was killed and then he killed the officer. I need to go and look at that. When I tell you I'm out of the loop, or I'm out of the loop as far as talking about it here, so I don't want to say anything when I don't know enough yet. But I have seen that story as well. I have seen that every time they go to the trial, it's a million police officers there kind of doing that intimidation thing. We'll come back to that. I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about before I start talking. Thank you, JD B. Laws. You're so knowledgeable. We appreciate you, Calvin. I appreciate you guys as well. Actually, less likely, that's exactly what we're about to talk about right now. Please talk about Tyler Chase Butler, 27-year-old African-American man from Spotsylvania County, Virginia. One of the things that has become very annoying in this current era of what I call the content creation is everybody is trying to make it, right? Everybody wants a platform. Everybody. And one of the things that I've always said has been annoying is prank culture, right? Actually, I think I'm going to actually pull the article just to get this cleared up some. This is the teenager that was shot and killed because they practically were breaking into somebody else's house. And then the narrative was, it was a part of a prank. Virginia teenager shot and killed by homeowner while recording TikTok prank video. Tyler Chase Butler was arrested on several charges, including second-degree murder and the death of Michael Bosworth Jr. Virginia teenagers said they were recording a ding-dong ditch prank for a TikTok video when a homeowner opened fire, killing an 18-year-old boy. Pay attention to that. An 18-year-old boy. Now, again, Mike... Tamir Rice was a grown man at 12 with his BB gun at the playground. And I'm not trying to whack this person because they're not even here anymore. But all of a sudden, Michael Bosworth Jr. is a boy at 18. Okay. All right. Cool. This is almost like when Ryan Lochte got in trouble in Brazil and they said, oh, these are some kids just goofing around. And Ryan Lochte was 32. 32 is old enough for your hairline to recede, please. All right. Anyway, the homeowner, Tyler Chase Butler, was arrested on charges of second-degree murder, malicious wounding, and use of firearm and commission of a felony in the death of Michael Bosworth Jr. By the way, this is a white 18-year-old that has died. It's not clear whether Butler has an attorney. The shooting happened around 3 a.m. I need y'all to be here with me. The shooting happened around 3 a.m. Saturday in Spotsylvania County. Deputies were sent to the home near McKenzie Lane in the Washington, D.C. suburb following a call from a residential burglary in progress. And I'm going to stop right there because that's all I need. The man thought these people were breaking into his house. Any other time, y'all want to be pro, not y'all, but people who, you know who we're talking about, are all pro Second Amendment, gun rights, safety. And the reason we have the Second Amendment is to protect our families and protect everything. You have a bunch of idiots who break into somebody's house at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. Spotsylvania County, it's kind of sparse out there anyway. It's not, so I don't know if this is like out in the woods or wherever. You break into somebody's house at 3 a.m. This person thinks you're coming into their house, maybe to rob them, to kill them, to steal. They're protecting themselves, their family, their livelihood. Yeah, they're going to shoot you. What the hell did you think was going to happen? And then they go and charge the guy for protecting his house. Any other time you want to have a stand your ground law, this, that, and the third. And this is why I'm like, this is the stuff we're talking about, right? You're going to charge him with this because these fools want to come out here and do TikTok pranks. One, this is not the era to prank people. Ain't nobody playing games right now. Leave people alone, especially in a state like Virginia. Even though Virginia is kind of purple at this moment, Virginia is a red state. Once you get out of the 7 cities around Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, all that over there, and you get out of Northern Virginia, the rest of the state is red. Oh, and that little segment of Richmond. That is a red Trump country. We just waiting for the race war to kick off kind of state. And so black folks, especially those who are not really living in DC metropolitan areas, really are kind of watching their backs when they get them big old giant houses out there in the suburbs, because there's been so many instances where there's been some nonsense out there. We've talked about the nonsense that's happened in places like Virginia. We talked about specifically the county in Virginia, or the Prince. Hold on, what county was that? Let me see. It's the county in Virginia when segregation was ended and the schools had to integrate, and they were like, we're not integrating our schools, and they closed the entire school district and school system for 2 years just so black kids couldn't go to their schools. I cannot remember which county that was. Somebody in the chat corrected for me. on the tip of my, it's a county named after one of them British royals. But either way, again, Virginia got a lot going on. That's the point that I want to make. Let me see if there's any other details in this news story that I'm missing out on. But are you serious? Like, come on. What county is that? Y'all got it on here yet? Nope. Prince Edward County. Thank you so much, Jeanette Perry. Prince Edward County. When they said desegregate the schools, integrate, they said we just gonna close all our schools, and they closed the schools down for 2 years. Now the white kids were able to go to private institutions and everything else like that. Black folks had to go to churches and people's basements and continue their education. But that's how strong racism is in Virginia. And remember, Virginia is the capital of the Confederacy. Shout out to Richmond, Virginia. I do enjoy going in and see my friends and stuff, but again, the history is still there. And so folks are trying to mine theirs. So if I'm sleeping in my home, it's 3 a.m. It's 3 dudes coming and they probably goofing and all the other crap. I don't know. Listen, you got to think about when you get awakened abruptly. Your mind takes a minute to process everything. You don't know what's happening. You just hear loud noises and you hear voices that you don't recognize. The first thing you're thinking of is there must be danger. I need to protect myself or whoever else is in the house. Like, come on, be for real. Man. Bosworth was a senior at Massaponax High School. He was killed hours before the school prom. And I mean, it's sad that this happened, but it's like, y'all got to have discernment with this kind of stuff. The other teens gave similar accounts and told the detectives that he had a video on his phone of them doing the prank earlier that day. Like, come on. Y'all got to be for real. Again, especially with the climate in this country, this is not the time to bother folks. This is why I'm always like, leave people alone. It's one of the reasons why I was never into prank culture or the prank channels, because it's annoying. Leave people alone. Especially in this area. There are so many people who have lost their jobs in the last few months because of this stupid Doge nonsense. They don't know how they're going to keep their house or stay in their lease or pay their kids' tuition or pay their wife's medical bills or whatever else is happening. People are stressed out. People are antsy. And in a place like DC Metro, where the entire or 17% of the economy is the federal workforce, and then another huge segment of the economy is contracts related to the federal government. Like, this is an interesting area to be in right now, because for a lot of these people who have lost their jobs, there's nowhere else for them to go because there's no other industry. So you have a lot of people who are trying to just figure out life. And so y'all think this is the time to want to break into somebody's house at 3 a.m. And ding dong ditch doesn't mean you break in their house. Ding dong ditch, from what I remember as a kid, was we rang the doorbell and then ran, not broke into the house. I don't know what to say. That's all I got. Like, thoughts and prayers. Because what? All right. You're going to call 18-year-old boy. Y'all tried it. Any other time. Trayvon Martin, they wanted Trayvon Martin to be grown so bad to the point they were posting a picture of somebody else and saying it was him. They wanted him to be grown so bad because he was tall. And they said, oh, he was tall. He's built like a man. That's why Zimmerman was getting beat up. Okay. Right. So you shot him in the chest. Okay. Be for real. Okay. Exactly, Sarah. Trayvon Martin was 13. He was an adult. I think he was a little bit older than 13, but yeah. Who he would have been almost 30 by now. Let's see. Les Likely said, I did extra stuff and I contacted non-emergency for the county and asked about the stand your ground law. They said they're not a standing your ground law. But in the event that they're in the house, then it goes to the castle law. So, well, actually, I don't know if the castle law is the same for that specific county. But again, it's like, I can't fathom the idea of thinking you're going to go in somebody's house, right? And when I was a teenager in 18, 19, 20, I was pretty... I mean, I wasn't wild off the chain like that, but you do feel a little invincible at that age. But I still had the discernment to know not to do nothing crazy like that, right? When we were kids, we used to be nervous just cutting through somebody's backyard to get somewhere because we didn't want them to yell at us for messing up their grass. And now you going in somebody's house. Like, what? I'm sorry. I would have did the same thing. The exact same thing, right? Y'all have been putting money on my GoFundMe right now. Like, what? Get for real. K80 did too said at the Tyree Nichols trial, defense totally criminalized him. That's exactly what they did. And that's why the jury let them off. They're always going to do that. And it's the same cycle we've talked about since I started covering these police killings every single time. They're going to always vilify the person who's been killed and try to dig up everything they can find, talk about the time that they cheated on their math test in second grade and how they pushed the kid off the slide when they were 9, and when they were 11, they forgot that they put a Twix in the basket at the grocery store. It was in the bottom part of the basket, and they walked out the store with it and forgot. They're going to bring up everything in their power because they need to somehow paint this person to be somebody who does not deserve to live. And what's crazy is the examples that they often utilize never correlate to the idea of this deserves death. Right? So when they were doing the Trayvon Martin stuff, what did they do? They found a picture of some other kid with gold fronts. And somehow gold fronts means that you deserve to die because you're a violent person. They vilified his friend Rachel because you remember she was the Haitian girl. The way that she articulated her words and pronounced some of her words, they tried to paint her to be inarticulate and uneducated. And well, that means, that we can't have empathy for her. She's not like a regular girl. She's a different kind of girl. Like they do all of that. When Jordan Davis was killed, right? They try to say, oh, well, he was playing the music too loud. The guy was scared. And I'm like, the guy shot Jordan Davis through the car and went and got a slice of pizza. How scared was he? Ooh. Ooh. Make it make sense. Tell me who's getting on my nerves. All right. Exactly. So 3 a.m. is not a time to prank anybody. And stop pranking people. Leave people alone. It wasn't no prank. Exactly, Lyric W. They are lying. Yeah, exactly, Glam Girl. I'm trying to figure that. Somebody explain to me how that's a prank. Y'all let me know. Right? Yeah, Trayvon was older. He was about 17. Right. Listen, I stay ready. I ain't trying to kill nobody, but like I'm just saying, even in my car, like I told you, I keep a hammer in my car ready just in case I gotta go for somebody's knees. Somebody give me a hard time, but I'd be ready. Goodness. So she was talking about Geraldo Rivera making hoodie suspect. Yeah, they made the hoodie. That's why he was dangerous. Trayvon was dangerous walking in a hoodie in the rain in Florida. Florida has those summers where it's a beautiful day, 85 degrees, the breeze from the beach is coming, and then out of nowhere, downpour for 20 minutes, just wind blowing sideways, and then out of nowhere, the sun comes back out. That's Florida. Crazy. Man. Why was most of the jury in Tyree Nichols' case imported from Chattanooga? Y'all know why they doing this, right? Like, All right, I'm gonna move on from that because it's just pissing me off. Okay, that's all my heavy stories. I'm gonna go lighter for the rest of the night. Let us see here. It's Stevie Wonder's birthday, so happy 75th to Stevie Wonder. It's crazy. Stevie Wonder is so much younger than his peers. All right, because again, he was younger when he started. So Stevie, we always love. There was a great. It's on Spotify. I think it's called The Genius of Stevie, or maybe it's on Audible. But it's a great listen to talk about that really successful album run he had in the 70s. Definitely check that out if you're really into that kind of stuff. It was a really great listen where they go in depth with all the albums, like Songs in the Key of Life and Intervisions and Talking Book and all of that. Really great listen. So check that out if you get a chance. I'm just glad Stevie is still with us. And Stevie deserves more tributes, by the way. I feel like he tributes everybody, but I haven't seen a whole lot of tributes for him. He's had a few, but not enough. So please, while Stevie is still with us, give him his flowers. Let me see here. What else? Oh, Sarah brought it up earlier. AMAs, I didn't even know they were coming on. So I think they come on Memorial Day. AMAs air. We might cover a little bit of it. It's hosted by J-Lo. Janet's receiving an Icon Award. I don't know who the performers are, but normally the AMAs I sometimes cover, so maybe we'll talk about it. So that's cool. Now, I will say what's interesting now. This is airing on CBS. CBS and Janet still got beef from the Super Bowl, so I'm wondering how that worked because she brought that up in her documentary where when Justin was doing his halftime in 2018, they had reached out and asked if she wanted to participate. And in that documentary, she was like, you already know our relationship with CBS. So I want to know who cussed out who and how they made that happen, right? But that'll be her first, I think, award show performance since 2018. I think her last one was either Billboard or the European Music Awards. BET Awards, from what I read, is going to be paying homage to 106 in Park, which I think is a great idea. But they'll have like the original hosts and different performances from acts that were really jumping during the heyday of 106 in Park. So I think millennials and Gen Xers will really like that. By the way, I had no idea that AJ, that was a wig this whole time. This whole time I thought he had them long braids and all that. And that whole thing was one big piece. Like, you know how all the dudes are now wearing like the you know, they'll put that piece on when this starts thinning and balding, you know, they shave it off and glue it on and be walking and you can't even tell the difference. He had one of those on in 2001. He was ahead of the game. Had no idea. I had no idea that wasn't his hair. But okay, interesting. Hopefully they have a decent show. There's a lot of tributes that are old. We've lost a lot of people as far as those who have passed. So BET, act like you got some sense. All right. All right. Let's see some comments here. Somebody said, come on, hammer. That'll crack a skull right there. I said the hammer for the knees. I ain't going to hit you in the head with the hammer. I'm going to just hit you in your knees so you can't go nowhere. And then I can go on my merry way. And then you stuck over there crawling. That's all. Right? I ain't trying to kill nobody. I'm trying to live long. So I try to put good energy out there. I don't want to take nobody away from their family. Somebody say, happy birthday, Stevie Wonder. I got to go listen to You Put Me in the Mood. My favorite Stevie songs. One of my favorites. Even though it's sad, I really like I Never Dream You Leave in the Summer. That's a really great one. It's sad, though. I get depressed every time I hear it. I don't know why I play it. Knowing my daddy died in the summer, I've been playing it and then be sad. Shelter in the Rain, I used to like. It's kind of a slow ballad. I really like that he was able to get the original In Vogue together, and they had the What the Fuss song In Vogue with Prince on it. That was cool. Stevie, what else does he have that I like? He got some good ones. I'm skipping so many. I'm tripping right now. Sir Duke is a great one. I Love You More Than Yesterday. Uptight is a great one. What else? There's too many. I'm stuck in a rut here. Master Blaster. Part-Time Lover, Overjoyed. You and I is a great one. That's a really nice one. What else does Stevie had that I really, really like to play a lot? Oh, I Wish. That's one of my favorites. I Wish. Higher Ground. He has a lot. We'll be here all day going. Stevie's like Prince. You know, they got 850,000 albums. Yeah. So Stevie got some good material. All I Do is a good one. Who said All I Do? I just saw it. Sochi 314. That's a great one. Ribbon in the Sky, of course. It's a really, really nice one. Yes, Harold. They weren't growing out his head. It was like a whole piece. They just glue it on and go out there. My friend Brian sent it to me on Instagram, and it was like a whole backstory on that. I'm like, wait. Now I'm like looking back at clips and like trying to look right. You know how like at the edge, you can tell at the edge. Well, this is me. This is all me. But like at the edge, that's how you can normally tell. Like it's somebody I know personally, and I'm convinced that they have one of these pieces in because they turned. My hair's looking wild now. Sorry. They turned to the side one time, and I looked, and it was like I could almost see where like their hair started and where their hair stopped and where the thing started. I was like, oh, they got one of those pieces, but it looks good. You can't really tell unless you really pay attention, so I ain't gonna judge. Plus, if I ever bald, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'll be right out here with my piece on. Look, piece gonna be jet black. Right? All that's gonna be gray. It's gonna be jet black. But anyway, Living for the City is a good one. All right. Oh, That Girl. That's a fun one. My Sharia Moore. Stevie on the Cosby Show, one of my favorite episodes. That is a fun one. It's always funny when they have to explain that they got in a car accident with Stevie Wonder, and now he invited them to the studio, but Denise couldn't stop screaming, so they didn't understand what she was saying. That was funny. That was good. Okay, Music for Life. Look, see, Music for Life got the real ones. Favorite Stevie songs: Moon Blue, For Your Love. I used to like that. Send One, Your Love, These Three Words, Every Beat of My Heart. Yeah, those. Okay, that's a true Stevie fan there. I Just Called to Say I Love You, Knocks Me Off My Feet, Superstition. I forgot about that one. Yeah, Stevie that's a gem. Appreciate him while he's here. Seriously, because man, the musicianship, we're losing it, y'all. Okay. Skeletons. Oh yeah, they call it the man unit. I was made the lover. Stevie wrote the lyrics for my favorite MJ tune, Can't Help It. Mm-hmm. What else do I have here? I mean, those are all my main topics. I don't think I'm skipping anything else. Tory Lanez, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's everything. Newark Airport. I'm a little nervous for y'all, these air traffic controllers, but again, you got the FAA, and then in 2019, when Congress voted no on securing additional funds to make sure that our air traffic safety was properly funded and secure and could meet the demands, now here we are. Lord, let us all be safe in the air. Like, I got a few trips coming up, and international at that, so I'm like, Lord, please let me not end up on the wrong plane. Ugh, man. All right. Sarah, you say gonna have the Jermaine Jackson tape haircut. Jermaine is dedicated to that haircut. He's dedicated. I don't even know what is actually hair now, because if you look at it, it's almost like plastic. I don't know if it's like tatted on or what. Do you, Jermaine? But yeah. Oh, don't you worry about a thing is my song too. I love that one. I even like the John Legend cover of it. Oh yeah, and then you got the Christmas one. Somebody said someday at Christmas. I like that's what Christmas means to me. But yeah, that's that. Am I skipping anything else? I think I got the majority of what I need. Yeah, I think that's everything I was going to cover. Okay, we did good. Look, I did it in under 3 hours tonight. See, we did all right. So I'll hang for about, let's do 5 more minutes because I got to get up at 6. And then yeah, like I said, in the news is finally gonna make a comeback since y'all keep asking for it. So we'll start that next week, and then next Tuesday is the next comedically hard-headed episode finally coming out as well. So I'm gonna be a little busy trying to get some stuff for y'all. So that's that. I said I forgot about Lately. Okay, I mean, well, he got so many, I ain't gonna be able to name them all. But yeah, Lately's a good one. That's a great one. I'm trying to think if there's Stevie songs I don't like. I ain't gonna put that out there, but I will say that the Secret Life of Plants album is interesting. It's not bad, but it's an interesting one. Yeah. So there's that. I think that's everything. Would I ever go bald? I mean, look, if this starts sliding back, probably yeah. I think I look okay bald. I got a big forehead anyway, so you kind of get a preview of what it would look like anyway. So probably. I'm just grateful I still got a head full of hair, right? I'm at that age where some people's stuff starts thinning out and everything, and I've been fortunate so far. So yeah. Never mind. My friend just said, "Do not in caps go bald." All right, we're not going bald. We're gonna keep the hair, right? I'm gonna be looking like what's the name from Earth, Wind, and Fire? Verdine. Verdine got the long down here. Okay. Anyway, it's time for me to get off this. I will see you guys, or some of you will see me later in the week. I will give you guys the update with LA when I have an official date. Like I said, we're working on some additional stuff. So we're literally coordinating one of these other projects I'm working on with the different cities that I've been stopping in. And so there's that. Somebody said, pace yourself, Calvin. Your knowledge is a national treasure. Preserve your inner peace. That's why y'all only see me like every 2 weeks. Like, I'm pacing myself at the moment because it is chaos out here. And it is hard to have a channel right now because I don't want to talk about none of this. Like, I honestly want to just like take naps and go eat at restaurants and do fun things and not talk about none of this. But it'll be irresponsible of me to just bask in willful and blind, blissful ignorance. So unfortunately, I gotta still come on here and talk about all the nonsense happening. But anyway, that's it. Good night, folks. Stay safe, stay sane, mind your business so that you can age well, and we'll see you later on. Good night, folks.